Yo, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. How's it
Thanks for
going?
having me, bro. How are you?
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this one. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, we've had this scheduled
So
for a while.
yeah, for sure. So for those of you in the audience that are unfamiliar with my good friend here, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, talk
Yeah.
about your previous channel, your new one, and what it is you do.
Yeah, I will preface by saying I have a bit of a chest cold thanks to having young children. And so they got to pass the love off to me. So bear with me. I have a throat lozenge and some tea. Um, so I have two channels. And the first one is dedicated to Seventh-day Adventist apologetics. And some people might be wondering, well, why is that? You don't really see like former Baptist apologetics or those
Yeah.
type things. You can go over to that channel and get more on that. I've talked about that a lot, why I ended up getting into that, but I'm a former Seventh-day Adventist. I left Adventism about 14 years ago or so. And so I actually got bit by the apologetics bug pretty early on, mainly out of coming out of Adventism. I really wanted to be able to reach people that were caught up in that. And my youth pastor at the time actually gifted me Tim Keller's Reason for God. And that really like planted a seed regarding apologetics for me. And so I started the Answering Adventism YouTube channel about 3.5 years ago. That was many, many, many years in the making. And then just through doing that, I'm obviously lurking a lot online, and I have for a while, even before the Answering Adventism YouTube channel, just regarding the general apologetic sphere.
Right.
And over time, I just became very dissatisfied with what I saw out there, mainly regarding the argumentation that was being levied and made against Protestants, and then not really seeing what I believed to be sufficient answers and responses at the sort of level that I would want answers at. And particularly, though, the big gap that I felt like was missing was that there wasn't enough inward-facing apologetics. Typically, when we talk about apologetics, we're talking about externally, where as a Roman Catholic, you're defending Roman Catholicism against, Protestants or Orthodox, etc. But there's also inward facing, where we need to equip people on our own side. And so really Canon and Creed is, yes, it's dealing with external facing apologetics, but predominantly speaking, it is internal facing for evangelicals and Protestants to get them caught up to speed in a digestible manner.
Yeah, that's good. Your stuff goes really in depth too. I liked your sola fide video that you put out there. That really blew me away. The level of discourse in that one subject alone, and you not only used the early church citations, you were using the scholarly interpretations of those early church citations, which was interesting. So that's a nice, refreshing approach, I think, to those types of issues.
Yeah, and I think the people that came over from Answering Adventism to Canon and Creed were already kind of familiar with that, because that was the sort of breakdown that I was doing over on that channel. Now, it was obviously focused on trying to bridge the gap for Christians, which it's funny because when you and I first connected, you had told me that you were familiar with that channel because you have family who are Seventh-day Adventist. And so that was really, you were the target person for that, actually, which algorithmically it pigeonholed me into Adventists, because that's who's looking for Adventist content, but they don't want to listen to content that's like harping on them. So I kind of got pigeonholed algorithmically into like dealing with Seventh-day Adventists. But the goal of that channel ultimately is to help educate Christians to bridge the gap, because there's just such a worldview difference between the two, where there's a lot of talking past one another. But I always kind of took that approach on that channel, because I think clarity, I'm really big, I bring this up a lot, I'm really big on like clarity. I think that's one of the big things that's missing right now, is that there's just not enough. There's a lot of talking past one another, I think. And so I like to get beyond those issues and try and get to the heart of it. But unfortunately, that sometimes requires that you get pretty deep in the weeds.
Yeah, I really liked I like the stuff that you did with Answering Adventism. Your website is awesome. By the way, I'll if I haven't already, I'll include the link in the live stream when we're done here. But I remember having a conversation with my sister, whose husband is an ex-Adventist, and her whole family, or not her whole family, his whole family is all Seventh-day Adventists. So when she first came to the faith, she started texting me. And she never went to like a Seventh-day Adventist church as like her home church or anything, but it's like her husband's like, okay, now we're kind of taking our faith seriously. Should we go back to what my family did, Seventh-day Adventism?
Yeah.
She's texting me, and I'm like, no. All right, let me see what I can find online that'll help me. And sure enough, your website came up, and it was an excellent resource. It's like all the failed prophecies of Ellen G. White, all these things. So,
Well, good, man. That's kind of why I pulled back, honestly, from the YouTube channel. I'm doing like change my mind segments over there, live streams, that type of thing. But I'll be honest, the goal was always to kind of create an evergreen library of content. I never really engaged over there in a lot of the like cultural beach ball type thing, like
right.
what's the current thing right now, and then it's kind of irrelevant 3 days later. That has its purpose and its place, but my goal with that was always to get it to a point where there was kind of like an evergreen library of stuff.
Sure.
And then just after getting the data over time of the website, I mean, we've just been pouring the resources into the website now because I mean, it's just like every month it's just like growing and growing and growing. I noticed a couple weeks ago that ChatGPT pulls from, if you ask it about Adventism now, it's pulling from Answering Adventism. So
that's awesome.
It's booming over there. So I was like, well, it's probably time to kick it over to Protestant Apologetics, because contrary to what many people might believe, I actually quite like talking about other theological things outside of Adventism.
Right. Yeah. Trust me, I get it, man.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, one of the first videos I did on this channel was against Seventh-day Adventists.
What was it on?
Sabbatarianism. It was about the Constantine myth. So what was really funny was I went to my sister, she had her daughter dedicated, but they were dedicated in the Seventh-day Adventist church because that's where the grandmas and stuff are. So I go and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm going to be supportive, whatever. So we go and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the sermon, and the sermon from the guy was literally like, what did he say? He said, Constantine changed Christianity. Prior to Constantine, there were no pastors, there were no anybody. We were just sitting around in a circle, telling each other how our days were. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like sitting in the pew, seething, like rocking back and forth like a madman, wanting not to explode. But after we left, I'm like, okay, I have all of these citations in my head that will just disprove everything that guy just said. So I'm talking to her now husband afterwards at their parents' house. I'm like, oh yeah, well this. He's like, I'm never taking you to another one of these things again.
You're right. Yeah, the Constantine boogeyman is like a constant thing that I talked about over on the channel, just because it plays such a key role. It's actually funny, man. I've got Origen's commentary on Numbers here, and there's actually something he says. I made a video on this. It was actually one of the last videos I did before hopping over to the other channel. And in his homily on Numbers, I believe it's homily number 23, not chapter 23, and I believe it's actually on chapter 27 if I remember correctly. Man, he just has a devastating statement in there regarding that, because their whole theory around that is, if you read people like J.N. Andrews, he was one of the pioneers, and he was obviously using the history that he had available to him at the time, and then kind of doing the already taking the preconceived idea and then going to history to try and find support for it type thing. And he hit the big claim that he made, which is what the modern Adventist has inherited, is that Constantine gave the first day of the week its sabbatical character, but Pope Sylvester I, after, like right around the time right after Constantine, is actually the one that designated deceptively the first day with the name Lord's Day. It came from, so Constantine gave it its heathen Sabbath-like character. Pope Sylvester gave it its Christian-like, Sabbath character. And Origen has the statement in there in his homily where he's talking about, he's part of the Alexandrian school. So he's got this like spiritualized allegorical hermeneutic. And so he's trying to make spiritual application to all these things that he's preaching on. And he gets to the feast, and there's the feast of perpetual sacrifice, and then there's the feast of the Sabbath. Well, when he gets to the feast of the Sabbath, he asks the question. He says, well, how is the Christian supposed to keep, how does this apply to the modern day Christian, the new covenant Christian? And he says the way that the new covenant Christian is to keep the Sabbath is to go to church, listen to the divine homilies, cease from all secular labors, and meditate on spiritual things. So he literally says, like, basically, we're already going to church on Sunday, which is like 100 years before Constantine's even born.
Right.
So,
Right.
But this probably wasn't translated into English in Jay and Andrews' day, so he probably didn't have access to things like this. But anyways, the Constantine boogeyman is around every corner over there.
It's wild how much the all the cults like to rip on anything slightly historical, and I've noticed the shift. Like groups like Jehovah's Witnesses will do the same thing with Constantine. It's the boogeyman there. Seventh-day Adventists, so on and so forth. But it's like we have the canons of the council, or we have the canons of the Council of Nicaea. So what do they think is going on there? Like they just rewrite the canons, or are they just turning their brain off or plugging their ears? I don't know.
Yeah, so it just depends. So you're going to hear a number of, and I have an article on the Answering Adventism website that goes into all of this, all of it hyperlinks to the primary source documentation, et cetera. But they typically appeal to a few things. You'll get some people that are going to appeal to, like I just explained with Constantine and Sylvester. You're going to get other people that appeal to the Council of Laodicea. Have you heard that one?
Yeah. Oh, it all changed there.
Yeah, but what they don't understand is, again, Adventists are not taught and catechized in like historical theology outside of their own like systems. Ellen White's retelling and reimagining. It's like a history based on a true story. So like it's adapted and like tweaked to like be more dramatic, etc. But it's not like a real telling of history. Now they won't say that obviously, but the point stands. And so because that's the case, they don't really understand the sort of like taxonomy or hierarchy of councils. So they don't understand that the Council of Laodicea was not a ecumenical council. It was a regional council. So the fact that that was a regional council, they have to explain the fact that in both East and West, you have the first day being a day of worship, even outside of, the region that Laodicea is in. So that doesn't account for the fact that, okay, well, what about over here? It's not an ecumenical. They're thinking about it as like an ecumenical council, thinking that it had this massive implication that it just didn't have.
Don't you know the Judaizers were actually the good guys all along? Don't you know this?
Well, so there's some of that in their narrative too. I have a long series of videos responding to celebrity Adventist pastor Doug Batchelor on this exact thing, and he basically goes off the laundry list of he hits every stereotypical caricature point. And the story around that is it's not necessarily like the Judaizers were the good guys, but it's that there was all this animus and like anti-Semitism amongst the early church, like all the apologists, like Justin, etc. were
that's what it was. They were just racist. That's all it is.
they were anti-Semitic types, and so they were just hyper averse to anything that appeared to be Jewish because they hated Jews, and so that's it doesn't hold water.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that way. But I could see how those kinds of conversations would get very old very quickly. By the way, for those of you that are watching, if you want to support the channel, send in a super chat. We'll stop and answer super chat questions, but we're going to dive into some Protestant apologetics topics here in a moment. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the live stream. And if you are not subscribed to his channel, go look up Canon and Creed. That's his new channel in which he's breaking down different objections against what we believe is Protestants. So what church do you belong to? The PCA, right?
Yes, I'm a Presbyterian that identifies as a Reformed Catholic.
Okay, so you're a member of the PCA, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So you're based.
Sure. Yeah. Me and Richard can have some fun discussions about the PCA versus the PCUSA.
Yeah, there's a lot of my favorite Protestant YouTubers are PCA, like Anthony Rogers. So you guys got like a growing club.
He's been on Answering Adventism twice.
Nice. Yeah, I like Anthony.
Yeah, totally.
So you're shifting into the Protestant apologetics world. Let me know some of the things you were noticing in the environment prior to you making that decision, because it's a bit of a nightmare in my opinion right now.
Yeah, well, like I said, man, I've kind of just always been a theology nerd. It's just kind of what I spend my free time doing. It's just kind of what interests me. And regarding specifically Protestant apologetics, outside of what I already mentioned, that I just felt like there was a void in terms of like internal facing, to really bolster up the average person in the pew. I love stuff like getting into like scholasticism and Thomism and like these sorts of things. But I know that the average person in the pew, they're not really ready for that stuff.
Mhm.
And there's just not, I feel like, a ton of resources out there that kind of breaks the stuff down in such a way that like it's digestible for the average person. Like Gavin Ortland, for example, really appreciate what he's doing, obviously.
Right.
But and this isn't a dig at him, it's just as an example. I feel like sometimes there's kind of like, if you don't already have like a general understanding of the issue, he's oftentimes seeking to interact with the other side. And so
Right.
he's speaking in such a way that the other side there's already like a shared assumption around certain terms and understandings. And so I just felt like there was a really big gap internally for like, okay, if we're really trying to keep people committed to this side, we've got to make Protestantism actually represented strongly.
Mm.
Obviously, there are poor representations of it out there. These pop apologists love teeing off on, that stuff. And so, but where's the rigor? Where is the serious person? Because the stuff's out there. It's been addressed. Next week, for example, I have this is gonna be the longest video on the channel so far, but it's gonna be for the types that you were just describing because it requires that sort of thing. We're gonna be getting
Right.
into apostolic succession. Like these Roman Catholics and Orthodox will just tee off on these, low church, even some high church people on this subject. It's just supposedly a home run. I can't tell you how many people I've heard who, well, apostolic succession. And it's like they've never even heard that actually there's multiple understandings of that out there. It's not just like a
Mhm.
given. It's not just like the one side believes in apostolic succession and the other doesn't. And so all this stuff is out there. And I've spent time, obviously, over the years surrounded by my, what you could say, like heroes and inspirations through their books. And so I'm in my library currently. That's what I turned into my studio. And so
Nice. It
I'm just
looks good,
surrounded.
dude, by the way. Your lighting,
Thanks.
I'm envious of your lighting. You've got the nice backlight going, the little spotlight right up in the front. That's what I want to do here. I've ordered a like a LED stick to light up the back wall
Yeah,
here.
for
That's
sure.
inspiration straight from your channel, by the way.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
was like, dude, his lighting setup's nice. Sorry, go
I'm a
ahead.
graphic designer by trade. So that obviously plays into I edit all my own videos. I write all my own videos. It's literally just me. So I don't source the stuff out to other people. My setup, all my equipment, all my gear, it's all me. Now I consulted people on the internet and those types of things, but nevertheless, I really just saw a gap, man, in like,
Mhm.
there needs to be more rigorous content out there, but the way it's packaged and presented is everything. So the other thing
Right.
is I work in marketing. So I come from a marketing background. So I'm always thinking in like a marketing mindset. And the key with
Nice.
design and marketing both is good communication. And so over the years, I've kind of learned like the best way to communicate theology to people is really going to have to be in like these bite-sized chunks, except for certain types of, contexts, like a lot of live streams over at Answering Adventism. Not necessarily the same context, but there's going to need to be like digestible bite-sized stuff. So how do you bring this stuff down to that level? And so that's just kind of what I started doing. And whenever I embark on like, say, Answering Adventism, for example, I planned and built like a brand kit and like all that stuff like I would for like a business. Like if a client came to me and they said, hey, we need a brand and identity built, I followed the same process that I would have with them with myself. And so then I did that same thing with Canon and Creed. So like I basically designed this room before actually building out the room. And so I had this vision of like, this is the vibe that I wanted to have. I wanted to have this like warm amber sort of like kind of dimly lit, almost like a speakeasy type vibe,
Yeah.
where we make Protestantism look bad butt. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're gonna present Protestantism in a way that's like, yeah, Protestantism is worth, like I really get annoyed with this sort of like, there's just not even a good reason to be Protestant. It's just silly, the mentality like on X, and that, I know that's not necessarily always the real world, but I can't stand that mentality of just like, there's not even a good reason to be a Protestant. No, dude, you're just being uncharitable. Like there are definitely good reasons to be a
Right.
Protestant. So anyways, all of that to say, I was like, well, I may as well put, the knowledge that I have to use to benefit other people. And I'll just put it out there. I'm not necessarily trying to be like a leader or a teacher or a pastor or like YouTube Bible teacher. I'm not that. I'm just an information share. I'm a laity. I don't have a seminary degree. And I'm very forthright about that. I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. So I just wanted to share information with people that I thought would be beneficial, and have started doing it with Answering Adventism, transitioned over to this, and the feedback has been good.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, with the lighting thing, someone's saying, use your own style, use your own style. I've been doing the neon lights thing since I started the
Mhm.
channel. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've noticed, I've had the same exact thumbnail since I started the channel and banner. I've never changed it, not once. This whole channel's always been neon.
Yeah. Your,
Yes.
your channel has a very like synthwave vibe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They say I'm copying Jay. That's not the intent.
Yeah, no, he has like that tropical thing, like
Yeah.
the flamingo
He's
neon
my
light
very
thing.
Miami Vice. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
for
go for
sure.
like a Neo
Yeah.
Tokyo type thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
totally.
maybe
Yeah.
like cyberpunk type deal.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. $5. Thanks for bringing the Reformation Heritage Protestant thunder. God bless from the PCA, brother. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I like Dyer. He's funny. He's a funny guy, but I'm not
Yeah.
that'd be really funny if I started coming in here with like aviators and I do like the
Yeah.
Funko Pop song.
The thing that people don't understand too, man, because obviously you see a lot of banter online and like that sort of stuff. And yeah, there's times where like Jay is like a serrated edge, and he's like lopping people's
Right.
heads off and just like belligerent and that type of thing. But people forget that it's like, dude, Jay Dyer's an entertainer.
Yeah.
You're watching an entertainer, folks. And people, when you start making content, it's crazy. I wonder if you felt this way. Like prior to you making content, was Cleaved Antiquity like your first break in to like making video content?
Yeah. Yeah, video content for sure. I was active on Discord prior and I was doing debates there.
And were you consuming a lot of video YouTube content prior to actually making videos yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Did your perspective totally change the more you've made videos, the way you watch other people's videos now?
Uh
Or am I just
it's
weird?
I'd say no, because I come from an SEO background, so I've always kind of like found the
Oh,
things that I
interesting.
really like, and
Yeah.
like and I also do art. So, like when I was getting really good at drawing, I would notice like facial features, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a really neat feature to add in to this thing I'm working on. I like the ridge right here, or I like the arch like right here. That looks cool in this sculpture or something." So I've always kind of like noticed little bits and pieces of stuff that I really like of other things, and then you incorporate it within, I don't know, what you do is like SEO. It all ties together. So as far as what works really well on as far as keywords, like I'll do that
Oh,
sometimes. I'll do
yeah.
keyword research, or like what works really good in the description or the copy or whatever, like okay, let's do that. Okay, what works really well in an intro? What works good to grab their attention as soon as you start a video? Oh, I like
Yeah.
that. They're
Hook.
doing the coming soon thing, like great.
Yeah.
I think that's great. So I
Well, the
think
reason
if you're
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
I was
I
gonna
was just
say,
gonna
I think
go
if
ahead.
if anyone's gonna get into the YouTube thing, you have to be able to do SEO to some extent. And the
Yeah.
the way that the way that you're going to do that is by looking at who's actually gaining and maintaining traction, and then emulating the things that work, and don't emulate the things that don't work. As far as copy, as far as titles, as far as thumbnails, as far as introductions, where are people losing interest? What videos on the popular channels suck and they're like tanking in views? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What really blows them up? What topics are people wanting to see? So anyway, go ahead.
Well, the reason I asked that is, well, and that's interesting because it just goes to show that, like, obviously everyone sees things differently. But I know for me, I was a big YouTube user before even making videos on YouTube. And obviously, I'm aware of people like Jay Dyer, et cetera. And after making videos, you learn that, like, what you win people with is kind of what they expect to get every time. And so what that like the way you shape and form your platform and demeanor and presentation and all that stuff from the jump sort of like sets your trajectory that like as people come along, they want that same sort of thing. And so I think people like Jay Dyer, like I said, I view Jay as like an entertainer. I don't think Jay is like a not smart guy. I definitely think he's super smart in certain areas. But I think Jay is like an entertainer, and he initially got people off of a lot of his antics. And so to keep that up, you have to like continue to be an entertainer.
Dude, you were talking about before I came into this, did I consume a lot of content? I've actually been watching his channel for quite some time, and we debated long before I came on YouTube. We debated on his Discord channel. He doesn't remember that though. I got banned immediately. I was banned like 5 or 10 minutes into the debate, but that's neither here nor there. But his old videos, dude, like his lectures, they're super in depth, man. Like he did a series on Genesis that just blows me away. It was like, actually, here's scholarly works on this. This is why this position is fake. This is why this position stinks. So on and so forth. These are the fathers that said this. This is actually a condemned proposition according to the Sixth Ecumenical Council, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, man, this guy's like a scholarly guy. And then you fast forward to his videos now, and he's like, just like
that's what I'm saying. Entertaining. He's become
Right.
entertaining, so he wants to keep that up.
All right. Hey, I don't hate it, man. Let's take a look.
Yeah, no,
Cosmo Gang.
I like I said, I actually find a lot of his content to be exactly that, entertaining.
Right. Cosmo Gang, $5. What are your thoughts on the work from Tom Wadsworth and his issues with pretty much everything that's being done in church these days? Are you familiar?
Yeah, nah. He's anti, like he's like pretty much known, at least what I know him from is if he's the person I'm thinking of, and I'm pretty sure he is. So just to cover my base there, I'm pretty sure he's the guy who is like against like organized, like the visible church, basically. And he thinks that like you don't need to be a part of the visible church, which is just like completely detrimental to word and sacrament ministry, which is like literally the lifeblood of the church. It's like, how are you going to do the Eucharist? Baptism, the means of grace, like, which is literally what the corporate gathering is supposed to be all about, and like communing with and receiving Christ. It's just it's so foreign to my thinking that I'm just kind of like, yeah, no thanks. So I haven't checked out anything else beyond that, just because I'm like, man, if you're off on that, bad news bears.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Cosmo Gang, for the $5 super chat. Appreciate you. Yeah, I think there's a big epidemic, especially with people who are not familiar with history, outright rejecting things that were just basically assumed for thousands of years. Now we have this idea of people don't need to go to church or something. That's something I hear a lot. I could just watch online. I went to church. I watched the stream or something. That's absolutely insane. So I think educating particularly, the low church types on history and the basics is very helpful, because often what I do is not that. What I do is I'm blowing right past, right past Jim Bob, and I'm going straight to the people that somewhat understand what I'm saying. And it's like, you'll catch up, So I appreciate what you're doing, brother.
Well, did you see my video from a couple weeks ago? I addressed exactly that. Online church.
Right. Right.
So that's the other thing too, is like the other thing that's nice about Canon and Creed is the ability to like work in just short form, simple content. So like I have a roadmap, for example, like I planned Answering Adventism out for about a year. And so I have a roadmap, and typically when I break ice on a subject, I do so at a very surface level. I do like a 6, 7, 8 minute video, and you may have come across this if you're talking about things like SEO, et cetera. Maybe I don't want to spill all the beans on all my secrets and that sort of stuff to the audience, but I'll give a couple, ironically here. Those are good pieces of content for breadcrumbs. You know what breadcrumbing is?
No, go ahead.
It's where you like leave you don't exhaust a subject. Like I have to hold myself back to not exhaust every little thing. Like I meticulously scour my content. Like I have a video, the video is coming out next week on apostolic succession. I had to re-record it. So I've recorded it twice. The recording took 2.5 hours each time to get all I wanted every take meticulously perfect. Just every little thing down to the wire. Well, breadcrumbing is where you basically don't do that. You just leave. Like I did this in one of my videos on, is salvation a one-time event? And I purposely didn't bring up in there that Protestants believe that justification actually has two senses. So historically speaking, the reformational scholastics, Lutherans, Anglicans, and Reformed all understood and argued for double justification. Well, I didn't bring that up in the video, but I did say in there that justification is typically what people confuse with the one-time event. Well, of course, I got tons of people in the comments that were like, but, well, it is in one sense, but it's not in another. Well, they took the breadcrumb. So it gives
Right.
you and it indicates to you, okay, perfect. That is something to pursue in the future for another piece of content. And then those people will end up getting their satisfaction and remember what it was that they brought up previously. So
Yeah.
you leave breadcrumbs in those shorter, earlier videos to then get people coming along. And then you really go like here in the coming months, we're going to be like, we'll be underway. So we're going to really be getting in, like, we're going to get into, I would love to have a discussion with Christian Wagner, for example, on the metaphysics of transubstantiation and how it's metaphysically impossible. I'm going to have a video on that. So maybe he'll end up coming across it and we could have a discussion on that. But
Yeah, I could set that up, man. I'll moderate. There you go.
yeah, that'd be
let's
cool.
see.
Which I know he doesn't really like to do debates. It doesn't have to be a debate. I would just like to talk to him. I actually really like Christian Wagner.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I was chatting with him a while ago to try to set up a debate between him and Anglican Aesthetics, Sean Luke, but
Oh, I know. That'd be excellent.
they weren't able to agree on a subject though. Norm all man, $10. As you see it, what are the worst objections to Protestantism? I'll let you take that.
Okay. There's a lot in my opinion. I just saw a post on X that was like hilarious, and I was like, that's exactly correct. It was just like a mishmash of all the stereotypes. I think a lot of the canon arguments really kind of miss the mark. I think a lot of those are pretty bad. The sort of like, if we really want to get bad, the sort of like Luther removed books from the Bible, that sort of thing, or like Protestantism is strip mall church. Protestants, every Protestant is their own pope. It just like these sorts of things where there's really no taking into account confessionalism, but then also too, any argument that makes the false comparison of apples and oranges, of like comparing Roman Catholicism with Protestantism. Well, it's like Protestantism is a genus. It's like a umbrella category with all these different things underneath it, which is personally why I'm not even really a big fan of that word anymore, just because all it means now is not Roman Catholic or Orthodox. But it's like, well, but what we define things by what they are, not by what they're not. Like, we don't say a car is not a dog. Okay, well, that doesn't tell me anything about the car. So I feel like the term Protestant has gotten that way. And so anything that sort of presupposes like confusing the heirs of the Anabaptists of the Reformational period and their offspring with Protestantism, or confusing, say, sola scriptura with nuda scriptura, of like biblicism or Bible onlyism. Speaking of which, that's like one of the things that I see Wagner is like currently trying to, that it's like a modernist spin to say that scripture, it's the sole infallible rule of faith, because in the Reformational period they just said it's the sole rule of faith. So those types of arguments, I don't really find them very convincing. And obviously there's like a lot more, but those are like a handful, I guess.
Yeah. My favorite one is basically, like you just said, lumping all Protestants in together as if they're one big church and saying, oh, you've got women pastors, you've got, pride flags on churches or something.
It'd be no different than me and I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to sink down to like this sort of level, but like I do have to fight the temptation to do it. And I think we were talking actually about this kind of in that group chat that we have. It'd be no different than if I was like, all these one true churchers, they can't even make up their mind. Some of them have this prophetess called Ellen G. White. Others have this prophetess named Joseph Smith. Some of them have a pope who they think is infallible and speaks ex cathedra. Some of them have denounced the pope and split off from them in the Great Schism of 1056. And if we just talked about them like this big malaise, because they're all just one true churchers,
Right. Make up a new term. Yeah, you'd have to tool that a bit and make it more catchy.
What? Oh, one true churchers.
Yeah, you have to come up with a better term, one that'll stick. That's more more slick.
Paul from the other Paul has come up with ecclesialism, but I feel like that is a little bit like, not like super scholarly, but I feel like it is a little bit, because I don't feel like the average person even understands like what ecclesiology is. So it's a little clunky. Maybe I need to think about it a little bit more, but that's the term I've been using, is one true churcher.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a one true church movement.
Yeah, that might be simple enough. I'll have to mull that over. I've actually been thinking about that because that is kind of a comparable argument to some of the antics that they try to push against Protestants. I had this one guy, absolutely crazy dude that was like, you're gonna have to defend all of Protestantism in a debate with me, and I only have to defend my church,
Yeah.
like, and I'm like, I'm not
Okay.
doing that in a debate. That's never going to happen.
Yeah. Again,
I'll
it'd be
yeah,
no different than you in reverse saying, just hypothetically here, I'm gonna only have to defend the Augsburg Confession,
mhm,
and I'm gonna show how united Augsburg Catholics are, but you're gonna have to defend all the one true church groups.
right, right, exactly.
Like what?
Yeah, well, I mean, we could do that, but I feel like a lot of people would probably not get it
No.
if they're not that tuned in.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed though, and the reason that I made my channel is because I've noticed a lot of the Protestant apologetics, the people who are doing it out there right now are missing the mark. I mean, I
Yep.
think Gavin Ortland does a good job in most of his stuff. I think I think Anthony Rogers does a pretty decent job at it. Though, we would disagree in certain areas. But I mean, if you look around the landscape, it's like for every one guy that does a decent job at defending Protestant theology, you have like 20, 50 Roman Catholics, 50 Eastern Orthodox that are out
Yep.
there hammering it every single day, making clips. It's like an army of people, and you've got like one, two, three guys, or you've got the smart guys that refuse to do debates, and they're talking about Luther's small catechism or something. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're teaching, they're not debating. But debates really are what changed minds. So that was more my focus was I want to go out there, I want to debate. I'm going to go out there and have interactions with these guys because that's what I do. I don't have the Gavin Ortland kind of
Yeah.
ironic, calm demeanor. I'm a little more attack. So I've always kind of been that way. But I don't know. That's what I noticed. Have you noticed the same thing? There's not that many strong Protestant debaters out there.
Oh, definitely. And for some reason along the way, man, and for those that watched Answering Adventism, I mean, they're gonna know. I don't hold back. Now on it's a little more toned down on Canon and Creed because to some degree, I think that your energy should match your knowledge.
Mhm.
So like I understand Adventism very well. Contrary to the Adventist apologists that want to act like I'm a clueless, this and that, yet they spend all their time talking about me and making
Right.
videos about me, but I'm totally clueless. I know Adventism very well. So I'm able to back up the energy that I bring. Now, I don't bring necessarily that same energy to every other tradition out there because I don't know every other tradition out there as well. But in terms of like having a spine, oh, totally. And I'm not saying Gavin Ortland, for example, I don't want to dog on him. I'm not saying this to dog
Sure.
on him at all. And I don't think you were either. We're just saying different strokes for different folks because
Yeah.
I always told people over on Answering Adventism, if you don't like this sort of direct, serrated edge approach, totally get it. But in my experience growing up in that world, I tried to target it on what I thought Adventists needed because I knew they would see the content. And I knew that Christians, if they saw it, they wouldn't be as off put by it. Maybe they would be, but for the most part, it's going to be Adventists who see it and think, oh man, this guy's like really coming at me type thing.
Hmm.
But growing up in that world, man, it's a big kumbaya around the fire. Like, everything's hunky dory. We live in this like shoebox of a universe
Yep.
and everything's not okay. And they don't have anyone just straight shooting it down the barrel to them like, yo, this is not okay. This is not good. It's not Christian. False God, false prophet,
Yeah.
false church. You need to get out of here. You need to come be a real Christian, etc. And so I took that approach because of that. And so in the world of Protestantism, though, I agree. I think that there's a little bit lacking of like, come on, guys, we got to have a spine. We got to
Right.
like, you know,
Yeah.
you don't have to be a jerk and you don't have to be rude, but you can at the same time, again, no wonder people think Protestantism is a joke, is because
Yeah.
it's like, well, the way you're presenting it is like Veggie Tales apologetics,
Hmm.
and it is a joke. So
Yeah. That's why I like Anthony Rogers.
yeah,
He'll charge right at it. All right,
yeah,
$5 super chat. Kiss speaks. Both your channels helped me to stay and love being a Protestant. Much love. Hey, God bless you.
yes,
Thank you so much. Yeah, I noticed that a lot. I've always been a debater. I debated for years before I came onto YouTube. Actually, it was Redeemed Zoomer that recommended I start the channel because I had been at that point. I was running. I don't know if you're familiar with that platform at all, but I had run the Scripture Alone Discord server, which at the time was the largest Protestant Discord server. I ran that with Dr. Reverend Mike and a couple other people. But I would go out and do debates. I would go into the Orthodox servers, debate people, jump on the VC chat. We'd set up events or whatever, and I'd go debate, the Orthodox guys, or I'd go debate the Roman Catholic guys. It's just kind of what I did. And after a while, I had gotten banned from every single Orthodox and Roman Catholic server, just about all the big ones at least. So I was like, this platform kind of stinks. What do I do now? And 6 months prior to getting to that point, Zoomer was like, dude, you should just make a YouTube channel because it's really just me out here doing this. I'm like, okay, whatever, so I did it. And, we've been running strong, and the channel's grown very, very quick
I know
we've been doing it for less than a year. So praise God.
Yeah, dude, which is very anomalous. I don't know if you know the statistics behind the average YouTube channel and growth rates and that sort of thing, but it just goes to show there's a need for this. Like, there's people are hungry, and I just get inundated now with, people that didn't know about Answering Adventism that are coming across this that are like, oh, thank you, and just being able to, again, over time, if somebody sticks around, you don't give them the buffet every time they show up. You give them controlled portions. And then over time, the next thing they know, 2 years later, it's like, man, they've been stuffed full in like a digestible manner to where now they feel equipped, where when they hear these silly arguments, they're like, yeah, okay, I can spot the issue.
Right. And then they come over to my channel. It's just clown mask compilations.
Yeah.
Dude, I gotta admit that is a really funny apologetic point to make, the clown mask thing. I don't know why, it makes me laugh every time.
Yeah. Some of your compilation videos were like the first ones that I saw. That's what YouTube decided to show me, and I was like, what the heck is this? And dude, some of those were great.
Dude, yeah, I gotta do more. There's a lot of other people who have made them, but I really, to do my research, just to give you a bit of a background on how I've kind of come to know what I know, is utilize the groups that do internal critiques of their own system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, right.
Like watch guys like Taylor Marshall, watch guys like Lofton, watch guys like, and take the arguments they use against their own system and say, well, look, this is what the Roman Catholic guys are saying. That's effective. And then also just understanding church history, because it's not all YouTube stuff. I do a lot of reading. Like, you have to be able to understand what they believe. So you got to read through Palamas. You got to read through their Orthodox liturgies. Yeah, Denzinger. Yep, you got to read through Denzinger. Absolutely. So where they get their dogma from, because this is the thing. If you're going to engage in this type of stuff and you don't know anything about what the opposing side believes, and you're approaching them with straw men, you're like, oh, you're re-sacrificing Christ every mass. You believe you're re-sacrificing Christ. Like, read the catechism. It says the exact opposite. Or
didn't
like,
you know that Jesus said, don't call any man father? Checkmate, Catholic.
It's over. Yeah, exactly.
Like, a little part of my soul dies every time I hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
cringe.
Or there's the guys that are like the real Jim Bob types, where they'll make channels and they'll put the fake Pope hat on, and they're like, I totally owned the Pope. The only people that you're making like look bad is yourself. You know what I mean?
Well, and those people are entertainers. They're not trying to be serious. Like, I'm not trying to be an entertainer. Obviously, I want people to stick around and whatnot, but I'm not really into antics. I'm really into all signal, no noise. Those guys are all about noise, no signal.
Yeah. So if you want some serious amber colored lighting, detailed apologetics, go check out his channel and subscribe to it.
Well, but the material too. The material being meaty.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is extremely in-depth. Like I said earlier, your Sola Fide video was excellent. And I'm really glad that you stepped on the scene lately. Because how long have you had the channel open?
The first video was uploaded in June.
Yeah. You've got 4,000 now?
Approaching 4,000.
Hey, what's up? We got Father Deacon Ananias in the
Oh, heck
chat.
yeah. I've watched a good number of his videos. He does stuff with Jay Dyer.
Yeah, Jim Bob is based. Jim Bob who?
John, dude, John the Baptist is based. I like that guy. He's like trying to basically red pill a bunch of independent fundamentalist Baptist types.
Yeah,
I like that guy. Yeah,
that's
dude, he
funny.
had a video. He was like
Alton's in the
totally.
chat.
Yeah, he's cool too. John the Baptist had a video where he was like dunking on Steven Anderson and all them, showing that they don't actually understand the Trinity. And I was like, dude, this is crazy for like an independent fundamentalist Baptist. I had a small stint in the independent fundamentalist Baptist when I came out of Adventism, so that's
Nice,
interesting to me.
Yeah, the IFB movement is very interesting.
Yeah.
I was talking to. I had lunch with Father James, the Anglican priest.
Yeah, barely Protestant.
Yeah, we had lunch not that long ago, and we were talking about his history in the IFB, and he was telling me some very interesting stories. He was saying, well, because we were talking about like iconoclasm and how certain online figures take it way too far, and certain people in real life take it way too far.
Totally. I'm reformed, so I know all about that.
There was one, well, yeah, but there was one he was talking about, like in his youth, he was talking about they had the Bible and they would kiss it. And he's like, wait a minute, I thought we weren't supposed to do that. He goes to the church the following Sunday, and they have boots, an American flag wrapped up in the Bible on the altar.
Yes.
And he was like, well, isn't this like, if we're trying to avoid idolatry, isn't this like, you've got boots, an American flag? Oh, and he said it was a rifle too on the altar. So they're like, oh, isn't that so cool? America, right on. It's like,
no, it's a joke, and it's disrespectful and sacrilegious. It's like the Lord Jesus is present on the here.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Shameful.
So anyway, yeah, there's some interesting antics from the IFB group. I like the who's that guy, the famous IFB dude, Steve Anderson.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is John the Baptist, the guy who commented, he has a ton of videos where he's like totally showing, he's like busting out like classical Trinitarian scholasticism on like Steven Anderson. I'm like, dude, this is crazy.
Dude, it's really funny. I like the memes that circulate around that guy. I mean, obviously I know there's some serious issues there, but he's like the one that I talk about a lot with my friends is he's like he's just talking normal. He's like, no, I'm not talking about potassium. I'm talking about vitamin K. And then he starts smashing the pulpit. He's like, vitamin K. Starts freaking out.
People remixed that.
That's awesome. All right, Random Catholic says $5. Scholarly debate about any Thomist theology featuring Wagner is something I would pay good money to watch. Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
I'm not a scholar, so I definitely do not fit the bill for that. He'd probably wax me, honestly, regarding Thomism, just because in terms of like formal debate, I'm not there to be able to debate scholasticism. But I definitely would like to talk with him about, because we talked about this on X and he crashed out. But I would like to talk with him about some of the metaphysics around transubstantiation. I think that'd be a fun discussion. Because he graduated from Davenant, man. I have a bunch of friends that are at Davenant, and so he was. I think Michael Lynch, for example, was one of his professors and that sort of thing. So, big respect for him on that. He's like the one Roman Catholic that graduated from Davenant.
Right. Yeah, I like Wagner. I think out of the Roman Catholic guys on there, at least he's willing to critique his own side. There's certain people who just won't do that no matter what. Like Joe Heschmeyer, I feel like is one of the guys that does that.
He's a friend of mine.
Yeah, I like Joe. But somebody made a comment on one of my posts that I thought was really funny. He was like, he could make proof of Catholicism from like a turd or something. Like he could pull it out and extrapolate, like, this actually proves Roman Catholicism. It's like everything, like the wall color,
Yeah. I don't mean this as like a dig or like a jab, and I would say this to him too, so it's not like me like trying to attack him or anything, but Joe's definitely a lawyer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
You can definitely tell that he's a lawyer, because there's like times where I'm like, oh, okay, like there's times before where which again, we'll get to this over time. I don't want to spill all the beans now, but there's a video that I've had saved for a while where I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to make a response video to this because we need to call out our own side. I agree. There are people who quote Mind the Fathers and abuse the fathers, and they need to not do that. And if I see people doing that where they're twisting, I'm like, dude, no. Like in my Sola Fide video, the average person who has even been involved in that discussion, the sources that were cited were not people that they were probably thinking were going to be cited. Chrysostom wasn't cited. Augustine wasn't cited. Ambrose wasn't cited. Because I'm willing to recognize there wasn't a universal consensus around justification early on. We need to admit that. There was diversity on this. So I'm willing to call out my own side when need be. And one of the big things that our side often gets called out for is anytime we cite the fathers, well, you're quote mining. That's just kind of the go-to. And I'm used to that with Seventh-day Adventists because, boy, that's their favorite argument is you're just quote mining. But here's the thing, that cuts both ways. And so there have been times where I'm like, okay, buddy, I know the chapter actually you're citing from Calvin's Institutes and you're quote mining right now. So I'm going to have a video on that where we talk about the two-way logic and serrated edge of quote mining.
Connor Meyer says Joe is better at debating than 99.9% of lawyers. I would actually agree. I think he's very good at debate. I think his
I've had him on Answering Adventism to debate.
Yeah, I think his rhetoric skills are very good. I just thought that was a really funny comment on X. He could give you proof of Catholicism from a turd. I don't know why. That just made me laugh. I'm like, that's so true because I see that with like a lot of different videos. They're like, how messed up the Catholic Church actually proves it's the one true church. Like, that it hasn't fallen apart despite all of these errors is actually proof. Like that kind of a thing.
The ability to just prove it no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of funny, but his rhetoric skills are awesome. And I think that's something that a lot of Protestant guys are missing. There's no optics. There's no rhetoric skills. There's some guys that have a lot of really good info, but get them in a debate like the scholarly types and they crumble because there's no rhetoric. You got to be able to be quick on your feet and kind of corner them. You know what I mean?
Yep. My pastor he's planted like a number of classical schools. And so that's like one of the things that's part of the core pillars in classical education is rhetoric. And I don't remember how long ago it was. And I was thinking about that exact thing. How I'm like, man, they don't teach like the average. If you compare like a classical education to like modern education, it's like, holy crap. It is like the guinea pigs in the box type thing, the like standardized testing today in comparison to like the pillars of like classical education. And yeah, it's so true. It's like people need to be trained up in again, because that used to be like a normal thing to be able to detect like logical fallacies and fallacious thinking and those types of things.
Right. All right, $5 super chat. I was curious about the grayish filter in your videos, Miles. Not seeing it here on the live stream. Love the content so far. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, that is because I'm using something different when I'm doing videos than when I'm on live streams. So the platform is different. Yeah.
Recovering the Reformation, $10. Thank you so much. God bless you. Wagner wrote an article on the impossibility of the metaphysics of transubstantiation for an Anglican journal. He converted so quickly, the article came out after he became Roman. Interesting.
Yeah, I haven't seen that article, but like I said, we had a fun back and forth on X, and he'll probably deny like I didn't crash out type thing, but no, he rage quit. He crashed out. Because I'm like, well, this is metaphysically impossible. It's like, it's a metaphysically impossible to assign the accidents of something to, how can the accidents of a substance that's no longer present still be the accidents of that thing, basically? Like, it just goes against Aristotle's own understanding of like, at least in my understanding, it goes against the way that Aristotle was actually using those sorts of terms. So it just kind of seems metaphysically impossible to me. And then there's some guys like Franco Bergerstick and these sorts of like 17th century Reformed philosophers that break that stuff down.
Yeah. That would be an interesting discussion for sure. I'm gonna try to. I think it's this next Thursday. No, the following Thursday. I'm gonna have Father James on to talk about some of the different views of real presence in the Eucharist. So that might be an interesting discussion. And then he's going to bring up Anglican holy orders, how they actually have valid succession, and he's going to argue from that. I would like to see somebody debate him on that subject, on do Anglicans have valid
that'd be cool. The thing with like the Thomism stuff, it's scholasticism. I kind of talked about this briefly in a video. I did a 7 things that'll trigger everybody video, mainly because I was getting so many comments. It was crazy. I was getting inundated with comments of people who were like, eventually you're going to have to disclose your beliefs. You can't hide behind saying you're Reformed. What?
Yeah.
Okay. So I made that video because of that. Well, in that video, I mentioned in passing something along the lines of, I love getting into stuff like that, but the problem is it only attracts a certain type of person. Like if you were to have this like gung-ho throwdown on like the metaphysics of transubstantiation, you're going to get like a bunch of Thomists.
Mhm.
And sure, there's like some Protestant Thomists, but not like you're going to get on the other side. So it's pretty much going to be a discussion where you're just going in to just have all the tomatoes thrown at you by all like the Dominican Thomist trad Catholics.
Yeah.
So
I feel like getting into some of those discussions is just you're quibbling over distinctions that are just made up much later on. Do you ever get that vibe?
oh, totally. I mean, that's part of the issue that I have with Roman Catholicism. It's part of the reason I don't think I could ever convert is when it comes to dogmatizing a philosophical theory for how Christ is present. Like you're basically like dogmatizing that you have to mentally assent by faith to a philosophical theory that presupposes a certain sort of like, it just gets into such a level that it's like, you mean a person's peace with God is going to be dependent upon if they mentally adhere to, and it's like, well, just believe, the church, like trust the church type thing. So I get the arguments that it's like that with all the dogmas. It's like, it's not that it's necessarily like that you have to understand like essential, like in your mind, all the nuances and all that, but it's that you need to submit to the church. And that's what it really comes down to. But yeah, I feel like a lot of that stuff, again, you're not going to get the average person in the pew doesn't know anything about that stuff. And it is to some degree quibbling. Now, the thing I do see beneficial about it, and the reason why I'm going to say, for example, make a video on specifically what I believe to be metaphysically impossible regarding transubstantiation, is because I'm willing to, like some of the Reformed scholastics were, say, okay, I'll play ball in your own field. I'll do an internal critique by assuming your own worldview, and then I'll reduce it to absurdity by assuming and doing an internal critique. So I do think in that sense it is, but I don't think it is in the sense of like trying to be like an apologist for these sorts of things, in the sense that going and trying to get people like to get on board and that type stuff, because the arguments around it, you're getting into stuff that 99% of people just do not understand.
Yeah. One thing that I was going to make a video on, but I don't know. I'm feeling kind of lazy and burned out on this subject because I talk about it so much. The canons of the ecumenical councils. If you were to look at a lot of the modern distinctions that Roman Catholics use to try to get around some of the canon issues that they have by compiling so many ecumenical councils on top of each other, they're just not present within the early church. It's a complete accretion. It's like the distinctions that they make up, like just humanum, just divinum, divine and human law.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, it's only the dogmas that we have to hold to. That's not the opinion of the early church talking about the ecumenical councils. You were to read any ecumenical councils, just read their canons at the beginning of each subsequent ecumenical council. Says, I affirm the canons of the prior one. I affirm the canons of the prior one. I affirm the canons, not just the general idea. It's talking about the canons of the ecumenical councils, but you want to bog people down with these later innovations of nuance, etc. Whereas I feel like our position is much more consistent, where we just say, well, they can be wrong in some of the things that they said. We might agree with the general idea, but we're not bound to agree to every single jot and tittle of every canon of ecumenical councils. Like Trullo says, like don't and how they get around not accepting Trullo is insane because it's affirmed at the Seventh Ecumenical Council. But it's funny because you read some of the canons of that. It's like, well, don't take medicine from Jews. Don't talk to Jews, or you're excommunicated or you're deposed.
Yeah, the big argument go ahead.
I was just going to share this. One big one, and this will shock people. If you were to hold that the ecumenical councils are binding and infallible, just look at this. What do Roman Catholics do every single Sunday? Kneel and pray, kneel and pray, kneel and pray. Canon 20 of Nicaea 1, the very first ecumenical council, forbids kneeling on the Lord's Day. So, I mean, you got to come up with these distinctions to get around some of these canonical issues if you're going to hold these things to be infallible. Whereas, you could be a Protestant and say, well, they're useful for their historical context. The general idea of the teaching, we can take that and incorporate it. But are they infallible in their totality? No. But they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to hyper nuance our way around everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a number of things I could say here. Like, typically the argument I see to get around that is that, like, well, Ben, you're not understanding the distinction between that which is faith and moral and that which is like practical in the day, and like you're confusing the two, so you just don't know what you're talking about, so it's over. Or they go the route of doctrinal development, which I talk about this on my channel all the time. Doctrinal development is valid if understood correctly. It depends what you mean by doctrinal development. Not that something can just come along later that's just totally foreign in substance to what came before. I would argue, and like I did in that Sola Fide video that you mentioned, is that the reformational position is not a total novelty in history. It is a clarification that didn't exist previously. Like, I don't expect when I go to Chrysostom or Gregory of Nyssa or whoever it may be, and I don't necessarily expect to get like a systematic theology from them. Whereas later on, we get what I would call further clarification, which is not entirely different in substance, but it's different maybe in the terminology that's used to try and bring more clarity, or like better specify the barriers or guardrails around something, etc. But that's not what we find with like a lot of this stuff. And the defenses that I hear, like, I like people like Eric Ibarra. I don't know what other people's opinions are of him, but every time I've interacted with him, super charitable, super nice. I think I'm actually I need to reach back out to him. I'm actually supposed to go on there, I believe, and have a discussion with him about Sola Fide. But some of the defenses I hear to this stuff, I'm just like, yeah, man, this kind of reminds me of the Adventist understanding of present truth, of just like, Adventists don't want to call it relative truth, but that's really what it is. It's just kind of like, it's just a escape card, like a get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
Anytime that you run into like a historical problem, I call it the present truth magic wand. You can just kind of like wave that and it's like, oh, problem gone. Because like you said, they can just kind of engage in what I call as well the fallacy of nuance. You can just nuance it away to such a degree where it's like nailing Jello to the wall, where it's like, okay, man, like, come on. This is just like such a stretch. Because what I find is the one true churchers, the system tends to have to remain immaculate. And so any sort of attack on the system, it's really difficult for them to like just admit like, yeah, okay, that's wrong. Or yeah, okay, I need to own that. Like, I do that, there's things I point out about the Reformed tradition where I'm like, we need to change on this. This is not, I'm in the minority on a number of things in the Reformed tradition, for example. Now they're still within Reformed Orthodoxy, but I'm in the minority and I'm willing to recognize that. We're not going to talk about my Marian theology tonight, but I'm definitely in the minority when it comes to like my Marian theology. And that's an area where I'm going to have a video coming out on this soon, where I'm like, Protestants actually have a rich history regarding this forgotten hero within Protestantism, that she was seen as this paragon, as like a shining beacon and example specifically of sola fide, of perfect faith of what perfect faith in God and true humble submission looks like, to completely surrender yourself in faith to God. And so anyways, all that to say, I don't find a lot of these defenses that they present very convincing.
Right. Random Catholic says, cleave to antiquity, wouldn't understanding what is dogmatic versus disciplinary in the canons, and understanding that disciplines will certainly develop over time, be more charitable? Sure, it would be more charitable, but I would also say, show me in any source contemporary to the first 7 ecumenical councils where they hold that distinction. Show me anywhere. Send me one citation in which they hold the distinction. Because if you were to read the ecumenical, this is a challenge I've issued before. Show me one citation in which they hold the distinction. Because almost everybody that you'll cite in reference to the ecumenical councils do refer to the canons as what needs to be held. Subsequent ecumenical councils have the authority to override what was stated in the prior on matters of if it's maybe an issue with like the liturgy or something, or practice. So a subsequent ecumenical council can override it, but it's not something you could just drop the ball on and say, we ain't holding to it anymore. That's not the way they're supposed to work. Now, that is a modern innovation in Roman Catholic canon law. But let me just show you one thing. So this is from this. Oh, this is the wrong screen. I'm going to pull up. Let me share the right screen here. I'm going to pull up the 7th Ecumenical Council, and I'm just going to read to you the first canon, because I was talking about it earlier. At the beginning of each ecumenical council, They affirm the canons of the prior one. And it doesn't say we affirm only the dogmatic canons of the prior council. That's not what it says. It says we affirm all of the canons. All right, so check it out. That the sacred canons are in all things to be observed. The pattern for those who have received the sacerdotal dignity is found in the testimonies and instructions laid down in the canonical constitutions, which we receiving with a glad mind, sing unto the Lord God in the words of the God, yada, yada, yada. You get the point. Let me skip to the, all right. We press our bosom with gladness to the divine canons, holding fast all the precepts of the same, complete and without change, whether they have been set forth by the holy trumpets of the Spirit, the renowned apostles, or by the 6 ecumenical councils, complete and without change, all of the canons. You don't find this kind of hyper nuanced distinction where it's, well, you know, it's matters of discipline versus, you know, whatever else. It's this versus this, and we only have to hold to this certain part. No, if you want to be consistent with what they were saying, you would have to hold to all of the canons. Whereas I think Protestants are more consistent in this by just saying, well, no, it's a historical attestation to belief, but they are fallible. But if you want to cling to infallibility, you have to defend stuff like this by hyper nuancing later on as time continues on.
I'd also be curious to know, and maybe that individual can comment again and answer this. I'd be curious to know, how is the canon, for example, that you just showed, Canon 20, how would that be classified under disciplinary? Like kneeling during the liturgy?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that fall under the I mean, if the 2 categories we're going to run with, even if we assume this of dogmatic and disciplinary, I'd be curious to know, where does canon law specify then, like later, since this is a later distinction, does later canon law somewhere distinguish this way and then lay out for you how the canons are to be understood and interpreted in which sense? Because I'd be curious to know, like I said, how is not kneeling on the Lord's Day a discipline? How would that be classified under disciplinary?
Yeah, I mean, they'll typically lump anything under like liturgy or whatever the case may be, like practice, and then morals in a separate category. But that's a more modern term. And this is, I will give the Orthodox their flowers when they deserve them. They don't do this. At least they attempt to be consistent.
Yep.
And you might see some online apologists say like, oh no, we actually do hold the same distinction, but they're borrowing that from Roman Catholicism. Historically, Eastern Orthodoxy has not had any kind of distinction in that particular area, which I do respect them being consistent in that area. So this is a critique specifically against Roman Catholicism because they have 2 different systems of canon law. But you know, they get around some of these issues by they have something called economia. So it's like the either economy or acrovia. So you either apply the rigidity or you know, the economy of the canons. But that would be completely different. I had a discussion with somebody on this exact topic. If that would be completely different, just because economy exists doesn't mean, and we just forget about the canon for the entire church and never apply it again. No, you still, according to your system of canon law, you still have to have a subsequent council to make a statement. Okay, we're not going to follow this one. We're actually going to do this now. You still have to update it in some form.
Yeah.
So that would be my small critique there. But as a whole, I'd say they're more consistent in this particular area than maybe Roman Catholicism.
Do you spend, because I've seen you cite it a couple of times, but do you spend a good amount of time in the Glossa Ordinaria, like Gratian's Decretum?
No, not particularly. I've cited it in the past, and me and Javier Perdomo were responding to a claim that somebody made about a specific section of the gloss in which it states, let me see if I can pull it up because I'm going to get deep in the weeds with this. Now that you brought this up,
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail us. I
My
was just
brain's
asking
going
because
to.
I've been spending a lot of time in that in preparation for the video that's coming out next week. I'm citing from a number of glosses from that, and so I've kind of been, and there's some stuff in there regarding what you're talking about. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, there's one section that appears to be in addition, which I could talk to you about later. But there's a section that is the preface to the Old Testament that appears to be an edition from the 1400s, whereas the remainder of it was from the 1300s. This is available in updated manuscripts, but it's still prior to the Reformation, so you still can use it as a citation. But some people will use a 13th century date for these specific citations, but it might not necessarily be entirely accurate. They're actually dated to about the 14th century. But the interesting thing is the same exact idea. There's prefaces before each book as well. So the same exact idea is present in the earlier manuscripts for the prefaces for the individual books. So it's like, no matter if this one section is later edition, the same idea is still present in the preface to all the books. So what I actually did, because I might be giving too much information here, but Javier reached out to me and he's like, hey, by the way, somebody said this about this. So I'm going to make a statement that I got this one thing wrong. I'm like, let me reach out to some people first and see if that's the case. Because if you concede everything that Roman Catholics throw at you, every single counterpoint without doing any research, you're not going to get anywhere. You'll have no arguments left. So what I did was I'm like, who are the #1 glossa scholars in the world right now? And I sent out a bunch of emails and I actually got responses back. So that was pretty cool. So they confirmed that the same information was present in the preface to the specific books, but the general prologue was a 14th century manuscript edition. So it was kind of interesting. So I did get responses from the top scholars on the gloss on that. I never ended up making a video on it because it's hyper nuanced, and I feel like people would just,
well, dude, there's some gold in there when it comes to like historical claims. Like when you're talking about like this sort of like these distinctions that we don't see, here, there is some, there's some gold in there on that type stuff where it's like, if you just kind of, cause some of it's kind of hard to read. You kind of have to have it's definitely not novice reading, but like, there's some stuff in there where you can read and you can stuff that I've seen thrown at me before where it's like, you go and look at it and you engage your reason. And it's like, actually, if you think about this logically, this actually backfires for like this reason because of your supposed development or whatever it may be. So yeah.
It's still a good argument to use or a good resource to use in your argumentations, particularly on the canon of Scripture, because this is affirmed and accepted as probably one of the widest used glosses in the medieval Roman Church. So I mean, even prior to the Reformation, they're using these glosses to inform them of what these particular books mean, what the distinctions are, and they hold the 2-tier distinction on canon and the preface to multiple of these books.
Yeah, well, and not just that, but like you can read like tons of other people as well who appeal to such a thing in history. So like even they're confirming that it says that. I'm in there because I'm checking some historical stuff or looking at what they're saying about the development of the episcopacy and how they basically admit that a number of individuals in there, Scotus, Bartholomew of Brescia, I can't remember somebody else in there, but a number of sources. I mean, they're all saying the same thing, but those are just two that are. It's like this. I think it's like Gloss 95 of. I don't. That's not here or there, but where they're basically, I mean, outright saying that, like, yeah, the apostolic age, the church was Presbyterial, and the episcopacy grew out of that, and they all cite Jerome because the argument. I don't know if you keep up with that one very much, but the argument typically is that. No, Protestants are reading Jerome wrong. When Jerome says that the two offices of bishop and presbyter was a development of, like the distinction between the two was a development or a custom that developed. No. He's not saying that the distinction between the offices is what developed. He's saying that it was the process of taking a presbyter and like setting him over the city as the bishop. The process of doing that, that's what developed. No, dude, the Glossa doesn't support you on this. Isidore of Seville doesn't support you on this. Jerome, Ambrosiaster, Bartholomew. I mean, I had to narrow it in. The video was already getting so dense. Like I was telling you, it's and especially when you're doing stuff like this, the average viewer is just kind of like their eyes are glazed over, but it's there. So at least the sources are there in like a digestible manner for people to see the continual stream of thought that that argument that's what Jerome is saying, to say, well, Protestants are reading him wrong. No, we're not. Is everyone else reading him wrong? Is Bernold of Constance reading him wrong? Is Isidore reading him wrong? Is the Glossa reading him wrong? Is John Duns Scotus reading him wrong? Is Anselm of Canterbury reading him wrong? Because they're all saying, is Richard Fitzroth reading him wrong? Is Georgius Cassander reading him wrong? These people, these scholars during the time of the Reformation, they're not even making that argument. They're making the argument that it became universal, so therefore it should be the precedent. Okay, well, that's fine, but don't tell me that my belief is not apostolic when you're literally admitting that my belief is what the apostles practiced. I understand that it shifted and became universally accepted, a different view. I recognize that. But then we come to the question of where do we roll with when it's apostolicity versus Catholicity? Which one takes precedent? And so I'm of the conviction that we need to roll with the apostolicity, but nevertheless, I don't want to spill all the beans here.
Yeah. You're not gonna leave breadcrumbs. You're gonna leave the whole loaf right here on the live stream.
I know.
They don't want to watch it.
I know. That's what I'm saying. So I probably shouldn't have spilled all the beans on that, but I definitely, if you're a Protestant, recommend watching that because it's probably a understanding of history that you've not been told.
This is what I'll say to people watching in the audience. When you watch those types of videos, save the citations because you're not going to remember any of that stuff. Save the citations, grab a screenshot, add it to your notes. If you're watching videos on these subjects just for entertainment and you're like, I'll remember that later, you're never going to remember. Save the quote, dude. Screenshot it, do something.
And the thing that's helpful about this video, like in the Sola Fide video, I was looking at different angles and different aspects. Like we looked at Rufinus of Aquila, his commentary on the Apostles' Creed, and specifically the line, the forgiveness of sins, and how basically his commentary aligns with a Protestant understanding. But then we looked at Marius Victorinus, for example, and he talks about things from a different angle. So there were like a lot more things that you'd have to remember like that. The thing that's going to be nice about this video, while it may seem repetitive, the purpose and the goal is to show you a consistent stream. We're not skipping from like, look, Augustine said this in 500 and then Martin Luther. Just jump. No. We're in the weeds. We're in like the 700s, 800, 900, literally every day, almost every century. We're looking at something where it's just a consistent, everyone is saying this until the Reformation happens. And then all of a sudden it's like this big, well, no, you guys are innovators. You're innovating, that type thing. So.
Yeah. One thing that I notice in interacting with Roman Catholics, or at least I guess watching like the Protestant space. So this is just a gripe that I have with a lot of people who engage in this type of apologetics. And I'm glad that you don't do this, but a lot of the more kind of unstudied, I guess, in history, people will hand wave history. That's not compelling to anyone. Like if you watch some of my videos and you'll see like, I call them Jim Bobs affectionately. I call them Jim Bobs. But you'll see some of the comments and they're like, I don't care. I don't care what the church fathers said about this. It doesn't matter. I listen to, it's just me and my Bible under a tree. I don't care if every reformer said this. It's me and my Bible. Show me this, I don't care if, okay, well, don't you understand that this is like a secondary proof that maybe this interpretation is correct? That's the point being brought forth. But if you engage in this type of space and you're going to hand wave history in favor of your interpretation that you just made up on the spot or something, that's going to be an issue when you're pressed in any kind of debate, right? So what I would like to do, and really the purpose of me creating this channel, is not just to have just me doing some cool videos where I'm I don't know, it's just me going out there and getting clips or whatever. I want to present citations people can steal and use in their own arguments. So that's what I encourage everybody who watches the channel to do. Screenshot the citations, use them yourself. I love seeing other people use the same arguments that I put forth and do well. So I've seen people on Twitter use it. They're like, oh, that's a screenshot from my video. Like, that's cool. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, man, that's one area that like I think the modern day Protestant and evangelical has to like be honest, is that it wasn't always our heritage, but the modern individual just does not have a historical theology. That's why I've been focusing on that so much in the videos right now. There is eventually going to get to where it was with like Adventism or Answering Adventism, where we were looking at scripture a lot. And I have been a little bit, but it's definitely been very focused on a lot of historical claims, because that's typically the area that I see people getting tripped up on. It's not typically scripture. It's typically, well, look, you're completely out of sync with everyone that came before you. Look, I can show you all these people. What do you do with that? And they're like, where do I sign up to convert?
Yeah.
They're just so uncomfortable. They don't know. So I agree. I think that there needs to be a lot more. And again, that's the thing, man, that's the thing that was like crazy to me is like, bro, the history is it's part of the heritage. Like I'm going to talk broadly here regarding like Protestantism. But it's like in the heritage, these people were interacting with these individuals. They didn't have this completely like kneecapped understanding of like, I can just read the Bible completely detached from everyone that came before me. It doesn't
Right.
matter what any of them say. Like I have some videos coming up that a lot of Protestants are going to be like, I've never even heard this. Like I got a video coming up. It's going to be next week or the week after on merit. Like they think the argument is like, well, merit bad. And then Protestants reject that. And it's like, well, not historically speaking. Do you even know the differences, Protestant, on the real issue with merit? It's not actually condign merit. So just these sorts of things that are really rich in the heritage and in the history that have just been totally forgotten by the average person. And like you said, there needs to be a lot more people out there who, unfortunately, what you described is the thing that gets the most clicks. The slop. That's the thing that the average person wants to be entertained. They don't want to be educated. They don't want to put in the work and really like focus and whatnot. They want to see a dumpster fire. They want to see you and Trent, him flip you off and get a meme moment, which again, we all love that sort of stuff, but like, we don't want that all the time. Protestantism is not a meme. We're trying to like show it's not a meme.
Right.
And so, there's a lot I could say.
That'd be wild if that was every video I made. Yeah. Just call in rage bait everyone. That'd be insane. Joseph, $5. Diving into historical Protestantism has led me away from both Eastern Orthodoxy and Catholicism. Grateful for you both. Hey, God bless you. Thank you for the super chat. Yeah, the Trent Doherty. I was not expecting that. Like, so in my head,
wild. That was
wild. In my head, it took me a moment to register. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Why is he like? I said something so plain. I'm like, why is he reacting this way? So the only thing I could do is like I didn't understand. I just shrugged my shoulders. Because I was shocked. I was like, what is going on, dude? Like this, he blew up. I mean, I had
crash out.
I had prepped. That was one of the premises for me accepting the debate was, well, this is actually the fruit of radical ecumenism. When you like any group, if you've noticed throughout history that has accepted this kind of radical ecumenist theology, and when I say radical ecumenism, I'm talking about like you're softening salvation on people outside of Christianity. I'm not talking about people wanting to strengthen bonds between like
Nicene Christianity.
Yeah, exactly. But when you go outside of that, then you start to see these groups like ELCA with the pride flags or whatever. They got the atheists speaking and doing like drag shows or whatever. The United Methodist Church. There's a United Methodist Church not that far from me. Nothing against Methodists, but the UMC is in shambles right now. They have drag shows at their church, dude. Like straight up.
Candlestick's gone. They had their candlestick taken.
So once you start to soften this stuff up, you start to see that stuff creep into the church, and you see that post. No offense to my people that are Roman Catholic that are watching that, but you do see that in the Roman Catholic Church now. You have bishops leading pride masses. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago in San Diego, the bishop led a pride mass at one of the Roman Catholic churches over there. The bishop. This is not priests. This is not rogue elements. These are the bishops of the Roman Catholic Church pushing this nonsense, pride flag on the altar, all sorts of disgusting stuff. So this is the fruit when you make radical ecumenism dogma. And the early church spoke out very, very much against that type of theology, but it's exactly what Roman Catholicism has accepted today, which is why I'm never going to let that go. That is the kill shot for me. Because in my mind, this is the one thing that doesn't matter what else they say to me. This is the one thing that would prevent me from ever being Roman Catholic. Vatican II is a train wreck.
Yeah. And it's just like, I talked about this in one of my videos this week, the video on Monday about, 4 reasons why I personally don't buy the one true church claims. And that's one of them. I just don't really buy the defenses of like the shift from Trent to Vatican II is just like, whoa. And yet again, it's always like the fallacy of nuance to get out of the problem. It's like, man, come on, be honest. You said we're flaming heretics that are going to split hell wide open if we don't abandon these teachings. And now it's like, well,
Yeah.
now that it's been like 500 years and there's like almost 1 billion of you guys in the world, okay, you're separated brethren. You don't have the
Yeah.
fullness of the of grace, but there is some grace in your communions now. And well, Nostra Aetate, well, they've always believed that we have the same referent. That's the defense that's up right now from a lot of people, is like, well, you're just not getting it. Obviously, they have the same referent. No. It also says that they adore. It
Yes.
says which is a worshipful act. It says they adore the true God. That was the issue I always took, which I understand. I saw people out there that did understand, like, okay, yeah, dude, there's like a normie guy out there somewhere that doesn't understand that when you say they're referring to the same God, it's because they're saying their God is the God of Abraham. Yeah, of course, duh, they're saying that. But that doesn't mean they're actually adoring the true God. That's the issue, is that it says adoring. And how do you remedy that when it's allegedly coming from an infallible, source here? It's like, and it's supposed to be indefectible. The institution is supposed to be indefectible regarding faith and morals. And so, yeah, that alongside a ton of the other, just the dogmas. Again, you're never going to convince me that it's like, and I understand they'll appeal to invincible ignorance and like these sorts of things. But again, it's just like all this stuff is just always like nailing Jello to a wall. There's always an escape card, no matter what it is. But it's like, a person's sins are going to stand against them if they don't believe the Blessed Mother was bodily assumed into heaven. Dogmatically speaking. And again, I don't want to get into my Marian theology, but I may or may not agree with that. But I don't agree with dogmatizing. I definitely don't agree with that. Whether if you hold it, it's like it should be a pious opinion. It shouldn't be something that you're threatened with hellfire for rejecting. So, it's a defeater.
Yeah, I recently did a video on the perpetual virginity of Mary, which is something that I personally hold to. The entire point of me doing that video was to show that what I believe wasn't insane. I really don't care if the rest of you believe it. It's just that's something that the reformers, every single one of them, without exception, believed in, the perpetual virginity. So, I mean, I could talk about that, but what I would like to do is maybe open up for the next 30 minutes or so and do like a little Q&A with the audience. What do you think about that?
For sure. Let's do it.
All right, cool.
While you're getting that going, or go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, while you're getting that going, bro, it's not even just like the reformers. It's like, this is like basically universal belief until like 15 seconds ago. Pretty much everyone believes this because, and you'll get a lot of these questions of like, why does this matter? Why? And again, I think there's ditches on both sides. I think, it's problematic to dogmatize it, but folks, just put yourself in their shoes. For example, the Blessed Mother had to raise the Lord in the house. Like, as a kid, do you have kids? I have kids. The God man was being raised by her. Do you think that that's going to affect your family dynamics? You think that's going to create a situation? So like just using your reason. And I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to this thing, like I get you can abuse, and that happens. But at the same time, you can kind of reason through some of this stuff to kind of see why such a thing would actually make sense. That she is the paragon of perfect faith in God. And in order to I don't want to rabbit trail here, but I do think that there are things that are important that are beyond just like, well, show me a verse where it verbatim says this, or, I don't have to believe the bare minimalism type understanding of like, well, why do I need to believe this if it has no bearing on my salvation? It's like, well, come on, man. There's more of the Christian life than that.
All right, so we're going to get into our Q&A section here. If you guys want to ask questions, leave a comment, put a Q in front of your question. If you want to skip in line, because I'm going to be going question by question by question. If you want to skip in line, consider sending in a super chat. I only need 2 more teal or above super chats to reach goals. So if you want to support the channel, send in a super chat. It doesn't have to be on topic. Ask us literally whatever you want. Go ahead and start sending in some questions here. Just start them with a Q. But anyway, I answered you a while back in reference to what?
I think the distinction between disciplinary and dogmatic canons.
What did he say?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, here you go. Okay. Kneeling during the liturgy, specifically during the Paschal season. Yeah. It's anathema. Yeah. Well, that's not true, though. That's not what the canon says. Let me pull up Nicaea 1 for you again. And this is
can
why,
we look at it?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
This is something this is an area where I need to brush up more.
Yeah, I'm pulling Canon 20 back up. So, so that's cope. That's cope, dude. You're coping. No, let me pull this up. All right, so this is Nicaea 1.
So it's
all right, and this is affirmed
during the 40.
Yeah, this is this guy's claim. It's only during the Easter to Pentecost season. Okay, so this is what he's saying. This is the only thing that the canon is saying. It's only during this season. That's not what the canon says. Canon 20, Nicaea 1. For as much as there are certain persons who kneel on the Lord's Day, and in the days of Pentecost. On the Lord's Day and in the days of Pentecost. It's both. It's not one or the other. So your deflection to say that it's only applying to this season between Easter and Pentecost is wrong. The canon says both on the Lord's Day and in the days of Pentecost. That's when it is decried. This is actually reaffirmed in Trullo as well. So this is doubly affirmed, which is the 5th, 6th council. Roman Catholics don't accept it, even though it's affirmed in the 7th Ecumenical Council, which is insane to me. You just reject the canons of ecumenical councils all over the place. But it's kind of interesting. I'm really weird about just reading the canons of the ecumenical councils and noticing the historical inconsistencies. But go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm like trying to read it through. I'm going to do some more digging on this. So like, yeah, so they're saying that it's only between like the 40, Easter to, they said what, Easter to Pentecost. And then your contention is that it's actually everything in that period, but also on the Lord's Day, like universally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Question mark. That's what you're saying.
Repeat that again.
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand what both parties are saying. It sounds like this individual is taking umbrage with your application or understanding of this because they're saying, well, no, it's only talking about a set period. It's not saying universally, but you're highlighting and claiming that, well, no, the canon's actually saying there is that period, which there's more days that are required during that period where they're there than the Lord's Day, and also the Lord's Day.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That is the distinction. And he says, yes, I was wrong. I admit that. I'm sorry. And then
so
he says,
how do you,
he says, but you didn't read the rest of it. Okay. Therefore, to the intent that all things may be uniformly observed everywhere in every parish, seems good to the Holy Synod that the prayer be made to God standing. Yeah, correct. So then you should not kneel to pray on the Lord's Day, which is the point. Hold on. But thank you for, see, this is big. Not a lot of people do this. So respect to you, random Catholic. Not a lot of people admit when they're wrong. So that's really big of you. God bless you. I appreciate it, man.
When I think if more of that stuff starts happening, I think if more stuff like that starts happening on all sides too, the conversation will move forward. That's the other thing I'm big on is like, I actually took the Sola Fide video down after first doing it. I completely re-recorded it and everything because there was one sentence and I didn't even say anything technically wrong, but it could have been taken in such a way that would mislead people. So I literally deleted the video, posted, and then said, hey, I'll repost this and better clarify that. So I think if more of that happens, the ball will move forward a lot more too.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good practice. If you have something that is an error, you either need to clarify it or remove the video, or not clear enough, etc. I had one video that I did where I had a guest on the channel, 18-year-old kid, and he quoted a pseudo. What was it?
Yeah, it's Pelagius. Yeah, it's Pelagius. But dude, here's the thing. Isaiah probably got that from there's been scholars that got that wrong. For the longest time, people thought it was Jerome. It's pseudo Jerome. It was more than likely Pelagius. Okay, there's some guys who sit online that just are waiting to pounce for somebody to cite that. And come on, man. Like, come on. Well, he's like 18 years old.
Exactly. Yeah. What I was going to say was, I mean, if a mistake like that is made, particularly by a guest, I have no problem just taking the video down. That's just common practice. You know what I mean? I don't want anyone to be taught fake stuff. But what was funny was the second Jerome quote that he used that was genuine actually said the exact same thing. So it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious because I get people that'll come back and it just kind of makes me laugh. They'll come back and say like, oh, you made this mistake. You. Oh, well, like the only way you could attack me on my channel is by attacking my guests. So I'll take that as a compliment, I guess. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's a smart kid, and he's growing in his apologetic knowledge. So I would love to continue to encourage young men, especially like him, to keep doing that, because I made the same exact mistakes, but I did it on Discord where it was less embarrassing. Nobody can remember. So
yeah, I mean, that's just part of it. Like, you just have to take
Right.
your hits and take your licks. And the thing that's good about that too is, like, that's the stuff that kind of sticks with you, that you're like, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew Stubblefield, $5. Thank you for all the work you're doing, guys. I've been evangelical my whole life, but more recently, I've been looking into historic Protestantism. Hey, praise God. Thank you for the $5 super chat, by the way. Yeah, all right. Let's see if we have questions here. Again, if you guys want to send questions in, put a Q in front of your comment. I'm going to start getting to these line by line. If you want to skip in line, send in a super chat, and I'll jump right into it. All right, let's see. Where do the questions start at? I think with okay, first question, Joe Williams. Thanks for joining the stream. This guy's always watching. Question: do you hold to the low taper faith? One day we'll get Zoomer to get a low taper fade. One day it'll happen.
Well, he says low taper faith.
Yeah.
What? I don't know
what that is. That's a new heresy unlocked just now.
Yeah, I have no idea what. Maybe I'm like, this is making me feel really old. I'm like, is this like something that the kids are using? I'm like, whoa, man, low taper faith.
Yeah, we gotta be youth pastors to understand that one.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Mickey G Tunes. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for sending in a question. Question: do you accept apostolic succession? I'll let you go.
Yeah, I do, depending on how you define that. Let me read you something. Like I said, I'm in my library here, and I was actually just on this page today, so I actually remember the page on this, and I will read to you. This is from Jerome Zonke. He is one of the Reformed scholastics, and he says, well, I'm a goofball because I thought I had the page memorized and I don't. Well, I wanted to read this to you because he words it a lot better than I can just on the fly, but I'm not sure how much they're wanting. I am, but I affirm Presbyterial succession. That's what my video next week is going to be about. So maybe I won't exhaust it, so you can go and check out the video. I don't believe in exclusive Episcopal succession. And I think that runs into issues, as I'm going to show in my video, because there's going to be a ton of people that flood the video and are arguing things that I'm not even arguing. I'm not saying Episcopal succession is invalid, but you can't say, and again, this is why I'm going to be citing the Glossa and these sorts of individuals who recognize this. You can't completely dismiss Presbyterial succession as invalid without basically engaging in the meme of you're sawing off the branch that you're standing on, because the episcopacy grew out of the presbyterate, not the other way around. And so these sources basically recognized, well, Presbyterial succession is valid, but not normative. It's not normal, or it's not like it's exceptional. It's not the rule. But they didn't argue that it was entirely invalid. They basically just argued that you need to get on with the Episcopal succession because that became universal. So therefore, that's the trump card. Whereas those of us that hold the Presbyterial succession would say, well, no, because early on, a lot of these individuals that affirm, like Jerome, that's who we were just talking about. Jerome's, over and over, multiple places. It's not just one place. He says it in 1 Timothy, in his commentary on 1 Timothy. He says it in his commentary on Titus, etc., that the early church didn't have the distinction that grew. That grew out of trying to fight schism, not by a commandment of the Lord. So those churches early on, he says in the ancient church, they didn't have that distinction. Succession was done through presbyters. So if you're going to completely dismiss Presbyterial succession, you're going to have to dismiss the actual churches of the apostles and like the apostolic age of the churches. So you have to actually technically recognize both, but you can then argue, for example, well, your view is not normative, or it's not the popular one, or that sort of thing. So anyways, check out my video, like I said, next week, because I put in a lot of work on this video. Yeah, I'm excited for it. It'll be interesting to dive into. Nathaniel Yamil says, favorite church father. Ooh, I did a video on this too, or I showed like a section of my library. Yo, I'm going to be honest. There's a lot I could say here, and I know I'm going to get arrow shot at me because of this, and I mentioned him earlier, but I don't care. I'm sick of people, and some people will say he's not a father, because some people use that term specifically. I'm using that for a specific period of time. I'm sick of people not giving Origen his flowers. Origen was based, and I'm sick of people acting like Origen was not based. So I'm a big fan of Origen. And even though I don't necessarily always agree with his hermeneutic methodology or his conclusions, I have learned more about the connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament from Origen than anybody else, and the amount of volume. But also, too, I'm a really big Hilary of Poitiers fan. He is, I feel like, just entirely slept on. Like, you just hardly ever hear anything about him. But I showed a video. My patristic collection is over there. So, love Saint Hilary. I like Origen. I really like Gregory of Nyssa as well. His stuff specifically on like death and the nature of man, which again, I don't necessarily completely align with everything in Eastern theology, but Origen, Nyssa, I really like a lot of the Eastern fathers, because again, even if I don't necessarily always agree with like the conclusions they come to, just something about like the way they teach, something about their teaching style, it just really has been beneficial for me.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to debate right now because I don't like Origen at all. No.
Oh, dude. No. So here's the thing. So I have, for example, well, no, those are in the other.
I was mostly joking. I mean, I get that you can like look at him for historical stuff. Some of his takes are insane though.
Well, no, for sure. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Is like, I don't always agree. But my main thing is like when I go to these individuals, I'm looking to like learn. I try to go to these individuals for something very specific. Like, I'm not going to go to Origen when it comes to like soteriology.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go to Origen when I'm looking for like the afterlife. Origen was a universalist. And so I go to them for very specific things. And the thing I really love about him, like I said, is like his commentary on Numbers, when he is talking about like he has this whole dissertation where he talks about the feast of perpetual sacrifice that Israel had, how that is basically typological of the Eucharist. That's the perpetual feast that we partake in. And then he talks about the Sabbath and how he basically says the first day is the Christian Sabbath, which I'm Reformed. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go. So all that to say, I really like him. I like St. Hilary of Poitiers. I like Gregory of Nazianzus and Nyssa, but a lot of the Eastern fathers.
Right. For me, I would say it's probably Augustine. I really resonate with his story in Confessions. That really resonates to my life story. So I love that. City of God was an excellent work.
Oh yeah.
It's super long and boring the first half. The second half is theological richness that you don't find in a lot of other writings contemporary to him. He has some interesting takes as well. Yeah.
And his on the Trinity is just like, oh man.
Yep. Against Donatus is a gold mine too.
So is against Julian.
Yep. So he has a lot of very good quotable resources out there. So Augustine would be a good one. I don't recommend anybody who's new to the Church Fathers to read City of God first. Start with a smaller text. Confessions.
I recommend for people that are just getting into it, read the Apostolic Fathers.
Mm-hmm.
This is how much there is for all of them. So it's like an easy read, don't crack into the Schaff set and be like, all right, I'm just going to like hammer this out. Like, dude, you're going to burn yourself out. Do not do that. You are going to open up, probably bite off more than you can chew. But the Apostolic Fathers, I visit the Apostolic Fathers probably every year. Specifically Rick Brandon did a great job. He's a Roman Catholic scholar. His translation of the Apostolic Fathers is excellent. So.
All right, let's try to blow through some of these questions quick because they're piling up. Mickey G. Tunes questions: are there any theological views you hold that aren't corroborated by the Church Fathers? Yeah. For me, and this is something I've been wrestling with lately, head coverings for women in church.
Oh, interesting.
That would be one thing, because historically that's an accepted practice all throughout church history, but it's not something that we do in modernity, at least in my church. And it certainly wasn't viewed as optional back then. That's more of a economy thing now. But economy with the scripture itself, I don't know, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So that's something I'm wrestling with right now. Just to be completely honest, that would be one that would not be corroborated by the fathers. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and the question too, to some degree, kind of assumes like the unanimous consensus of the fathers,
Right.
and that is a myth. Now, there are things that they are completely united on and unanimous on, like the real presence. It just I haven't
Yes.
seen anything that, but there's really not this long laundry list of just like the consensus on things. So it depends what fathers you're talking about. But for me, it's typically, I do believe in like I hesitate to use this term because people typically always get the wrong thing. We were just talking about Augustine. My view of perseverance. It is essentially Augustine's view, but there is a slight caveat. And it's basically because we would argue that Augustine didn't have like a formalized covenant theology. And the consistent outflow of his theology, if systematized, regarding covenant theology, would result, I believe, in the position I hold. And I just think he had a little bit of an inconsistency because of what he believed about baptism. That's basically the starting point. He had to then recognize, like, okay, a person can be baptized and be regenerated, but they don't persevere. So they can receive what he would call saving grace, but then they don't receive this special grace, the grace of perseverance, the gift of perseverance. That's a different grace. So you could receive saving grace, but then not persevering grace. And so he had this two-tiered category of the elect. There's some that are elect to final salvation that are given the gift of perseverance. There are some who are elect to temporal or temporary salvation, where they receive the gift, the grace in baptism and are regenerate, but then they fall away. Well, I think that that's actually unnecessary if you actually just systematize it out and you end up removing that blot or that issue without getting into the weeds on that stuff. If you actually hold to my view, but technically speaking, there's like a nuance on my understanding of eternal security that would definitely be different.
Mm-hmm. I'll let you grab this next question. I'm actually going to run to the restroom real quick, but while you answer this, because this is directed to you.
Okay. Excuse my ignorance as I never watched your other channel, Miles, but what was the moment when you realized you wanted out of SDA? Well, okay, so this is a bit of a, it really isn't like a moment type thing. I was raised in the Seventh Adventist church. My dad's a Seventh Adventist pastor. And this would be a very, very long story to get into right now. I've gotten into all that over on the Answering Adventism channel. So you can go over there to see that more in depth. But basically, I was a pretty committed Seventh Adventist, at least as much as I could be for what I was. And the thing is that Adventism is a gospel desert. That there's no proper understanding of word and sacrament ministry. There's no proper understanding of like looking outside of yourself for salvation, and looking to Christ in the sacraments and the life of the church like that. And because of that, there's just a lot of like just it's a lot of pietism. And so that tends to burn people out. And so over time, I eventually got somewhat burnt out. And so I kind of became a little nominal, if you will. I was still, I still would have said I was a Seventh-day Adventist, but I definitely wasn't as like super committed like I was previously. And it just through a series of events in life, God leading and guiding me. I actually had a pretty radical conversion. And then after that happened, I actually went back to Seventh-day Adventism for a stint because I had all these vestiges in my mind of, oh, they're the remnant and it's the end times and Jesus is coming at any moment and the Sabbath and all this sort of stuff. But it wasn't really like a moment as much as it was just like a progressive process.
Next question. Joseph, question, is there a value to multiple Protestant traditions or should the goal be Protestant unification when possible? Do you believe in the idea of theological triage that Ortland presents and defends? So let's there's a whole bunch of questions here, so let's try to keep it relatively short, but I'll let you take first jab at it.
100%. I'm a Reformed Catholic. That's exactly what Reformed Catholicity is all about. Dr. Ortland is about Reformed Catholicity. Basically, in a nutshell, Reformed Catholicity is focusing on the necessary heads of religion that unify all of us, which are found in the Apostles' Creed. Those are what we mean when we say necessary heads of religion. That's also one of the things I'm going to really be hammering on my channel is we oftentimes talk about quote unquote denominations, but loaded in that term is differences. That's the whole point of denomination. So we're always focusing on like, yeah, we have these differences, but what about the vast majority of things that we share in common? We share the same core foundation. You know, that's one of the things they claim we don't know is, oh, Protestants can't agree on the essentials. Well, that's not true. That's not true. Lutherans and Protestants and Presbyterians and Anglicans all agreed on the necessary heads of religion. And the argument is that those had been corrupted over time through accretions. And we're trying to go back to what the ancient church said when expounding upon the creed, what it is that we're confessing. So I do think that the goal should be for unification, because that's also too what Jesus said to be praying for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Next question here. Where am I at? All right. There you go. All right. Question. How do you guys feel about charismatics, Pentecostals, and Methodists? Do you want me to grab this one?
I mean, my answer is really short. Not a fan.
Yeah.
Not against the people or anything like that. I'm talking about the ideology. I don't think John Wesley had a good, I'm not going to go off on that. Seventh-day Adventists claim to be heirs of John Wesley and the Methodists. So,
what I'll say, I have some friends who are conservative Methodists, some friends that are Nazarenes. The thing that I guess would be the sticking point for me would be entire sanctification. That would be my big disagreement with Methodists, and that would be my big sticking point with the charismatics and Pentecostals. I guess the biggest sticking point, I understand why people believe in it, but my gripe is that in the early church, tongues is not utterances. It's never been utterances. That's an innovation. That's a modern innovation. So, I don't know. I that would be my biggest sticking point. The things that I do think are good is that they're very good at evangelism, and they are good at going out and impacting the community and doing community service and things like that. So if I'm going to give something negative, I want to make sure I give something positive as well, particularly critiquing, people who are also Protestant. But there are some serious concerns with charismatics and Pentecostals, especially when the gifts are abused, like fake miracles.
I was just about to say that, is the big one is the rampant abuse.
Yes.
And like the justifying, like some of them, the justifying of like false prophecies of like, well, a prophet has to practice. It's like, well, this is kind of totally foreign to the Bible.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. One false prophecy, you're a false prophet.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, and then they try to do this like, well, the New Testament gift of prophecy is not the same as like the Old Testament. It's the same thing the Seventh-day Adventists do. So.
Right. Hold on. Let me see if I can, because I want to get to this next question, but I have a resource I want to pull up to answer it, because it's the most common retort to this. Yep. And people were not paying attention to the video because I actually talk about Matthew 1:25 in one of the citations. So in regards, not saying you did this, Nathan, I'm not trying to bash you. Like, oh, that's what you get for asking me a question. No. I'm just, this was the comment that was spammed over and over again in that video. If I could redo it again, I would make it more clear what the argument against this hermeneutic is, or this understanding of this particular verse. In regards to the perpetual virginity of Mary, how do you read Matthew 1:25? It's the one passage that makes it hard for me to accept the doctrine. Fair question. Thank you for asking it. Matthew 1:25 basically says,
until
Mary did not know know him until, which people will conflate to and imply some kind of a change after that point. However, that's not always the way that word hios is used in the Bible. It could also imply a continuation of that particular state of being. For instance, if you were to read the passage, which I was going to pull up, but I'll just talk about it. Christ will reign until he puts all the enemies under his feet. So is he going to stop reigning after that? Does that imply he's going to somehow Christ is going to stop reigning? Yep. Does it always imply change? No, that's not the case. And actually, John Calvin mocks this interpretation. Not saying that your question is bad, but he mocks it pretty hard. He says, I mentioned that in the video. One of the citations that I quote from him is like, and these impious people who can't read the Bible, yada, 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 they cite this thing and they say this means somehow she slept with Joseph, which is preposterous. That's what the reformers said about it. So this is the most common pushback on it. I understand it. But that's the counterpoint to it. And again, I'm not saying you have to believe in this doctrine or that it's necessary. I'm just defending why I believe in it. So good question.
Yeah, and the other thing too that people have to realize as well is like at least the historic Protestant mindset was not like a lot of the modern mindset where all of tradition is like guilty until proven innocent. It was the exact opposite with them. It was the tradition stands until proven otherwise. So they would take issue, obviously, with dogmatizing such a thing, because I don't think one should be able to dogmatize that which is not able to be clearly proven through exegetical means. I don't think that there's like a strong like. If you exegete this out, it's going to say Mary was a perpetual virgin. It's that there are hiccup passages like this, as well as Adelphoi and Adelphos, cousins or brothers. But the Epiphanian view, if you understand, it's not, people think oftentimes as well, Ben, that the only options are the Jerome view,
right,
or not. And it's like, well, no, the Epiphanian view is actually probably the correct view. That's the view I align with anyways.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. The 2 comments down. So our audience is very intelligent. LM says, read Calvin on Matthew 1:25, my man.
Yeah, because they were aware of all of these, obviously. And again, they basically said that like there's exegesis, obviously, on both sides that you could roll with. But in this case, we should let the traditional understanding stand.
Okay. The count question. Could you explain why charging interest was historically outlawed in Christian tradition? Is this prohibition based on a specific Bible verse or rooted in apostolic teaching?
Well, it's usury, basically, is what it sounds like they're getting at. And that,
yes,
I don't remember the exact specifics about like God's law on that, but basically it boils down to like usury. It's just immoral. Like you're basically trapping somebody and making them like a debt slave in some capacity, which look around. I mean, that's basically what the American has become.
Yeah, it's all over the Bible. I mean, it's particularly in the Old Testament. This is something that was very clearly taught. You don't lend money at interest. And this is a carryover into Christian tradition. It's not something that's like a law thing. It's just that this is morals. You don't rip people off.
Yeah. And the Proverbs get into it as well, is that the person that does such a thing is basically unclean on the inside.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's all over. Exodus, Psalms, Proverbs,
Leviticus,
Ezekiel, everything, Deuteronomy, all of it. But anyway, good question. Great question. Great question. How do you find the time to read so much?
If you read 15 minutes a day, at least, you can literally read thousands of pages a year. 15 minutes a day. You have to view it like that. You have to view it as like, I just need to get in a little bit of reading today. If it's in the morning, obviously supplementing this, we're not talking Bible reading here. We're talking, that should obviously, that's just like a default, but supplementing on top of that should also be other reading. And if you just get in 15 minutes, you can read thousands of pages. So I typically do before bed. Helps me fall asleep.
Yeah, I just get hyper focused on specific topics, and then when I find a book I want to read, I read it in 2 days or 3 days.
Yeah,
I demolish it. I don't take very long. I'm like, okay, I'm reading through it, but as I read, this is actually going to answer, I think, the next question. How do y'all research? This will answer that question. Most of my reading is in ebooks. Sometimes though, if I read too much in an ebook, my eyes start to hurt, so I'll go to a paper book. Yep. I'm so bad about this. I'll buy an ebook version and then I'll buy the physical copy too. So I've got double. So it's like I have my library on my phone and then also the physical copy here. So I'm like, okay, whatever. But anyway, what I do is, the reason I buy the ebook version is so I can take snippets of the relevant portions and save them to a Google Doc. Because what I've done is, prior to doing any kind of research into church history, I've made a Google Doc separated by categories. So sola scriptura, pro and against; sola fide, pro and against; perpetual virginity, pro and against; immaculate conception, pro and against. And any relevant citation, I will take the citation along with, what page it's on, what work it's from, etc., and I'll post it into my notes. And that's why I'm able to, I don't know if you notice on my channel, I post a short every single day with citations from my Google Doc, because it's replete. It's years and years and years of this stuff. but don't be intimidated. You know, you got to start at some day. You're not going to have, you know, maybe thousands of citations like I have saved in my Google Doc, but you know, you'll begin to accrue them much quicker than you would think. The thing that I will say about this, and I know I've already spent quite a bit of time on this question, but the thing that I will say, don't use online quote mines. Most of them are fake.
Yeah, not do that.
Most of the Protestant online quote mines are fake. So you're gonna look like a complete idiot if you take those and you're just like, I'm gonna use this, and it ends up being some kind of fake work or whatever the case may be. Hey, we
And
reached our goal. Let's go. Goal.
Awesome.
Woo!
Don't use Chat GPT for quotes. That's like, it's a great tool, but you have to use it for the right things. It'd be like taking a shovel to try and open your car door. You know, like, it's a great tool, but not for that. That's like, do not use it for quotes, etc. I'm a physical book guy like you, but there are some things that I have to rely on. Like, for example, I have a lot of Roman Catholic works that for some reason they're just not in print anymore, like Yves Congar's Tradition and Traditions. Well, getting a physical copy of it online that I found is like $240. Well, I'm not paying $240 for this used book. Well, so I have I have a PDF version of it. So some stuff is in PDF, but I source all of my stuff from my own library.
Yeah, I do that with the rudder too. It's expensive to get a physical copy.
Right.
Andrew Stubblefield, $5. Here, take my money. I know it's off topic, but Miles, you did a video about Jesus as Archangel Michael. Are you going to follow up on that?
Brother, you missed the boat. I did a 5-hour stream breaking down over 80 sources proving that they lied to Walter Martin and that the Adventist view of Michael the Archangel is not what they try to claim, that it's not the view of the quote unquote the Reformers. No, the Reformers believed that Michael in prophecy is a type that points to Jesus. Now, some of them, like John Gill, was an idiot. He believed that Jesus literally was Michael the Archangel, but he still claimed to be a Trinitarian. He was wrong. Spurgeon was wrong. Okay. I have no problem saying they were wrong. But no, their view is not that, yet that's what they try to do. They try to add theological street cred to their belief by saying, well, you know, John Calvin believed this. Yeah, no, he didn't. So I already did that. Go on the channel to the live tab, and you will see it on there where it says, we caught the SDA Church lying about Michael the Archangel. And it's a long stream, but it's got timestamps. And wait till you see some of the sources in there and what their belief actually is and how it ties into the great controversy storyline, and how they're saying that Jesus, in part of his humiliation, wasn't just to sink down and add unto himself humanity by setting his divine nature aside, because they're kenosis heretics. It was the first step was for him to set his divinity aside and take on the nature of an angel. And he was pleading with the angels for 4,000 years, but none of them took him up on his offer. So they all rejected him because he had to keep the law perfectly on the plane of angels and like all this stuff that they don't tell you that is right there in all these primary source documents. So I already did that. I already did the follow-up, and it was a long night, and boy, buckle up.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. I might have to check that out because that's that's kind of up my alley with wanting to research that type of stuff. I really like the article that you did. I actually cited it at one of my church apologetics classes. I do one every Sunday on Ellen G. White's contradictions and her prophecies, like fake prophecies.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a cool article. If you guys have not checked out his website, I'm going to put that in the description here as well. So check that out, and check out his YouTube channel, Canon and Creed. Subscribe to that. Scott Michael, one of our members, $20 super chat. Great work. Thank you so much. God bless you. So I figure we'll go until what, the 2-hour 30-minute mark. How's that sound for?
Doesn't matter, dude.
Cutoff time. All right, we'll go for 8 hours straight.
Mega stream.
Yeah, that'd be insane.
Yeah,
I don't think I could do that. I think I'd just start talking slop.
Yeah. Well, in that Michael the Archangel video, by the end of it, my voice is like almost about to go out because, bro, I lost it at a part in that, because I'm like, folks, this is crazy what they're saying.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Julio JD, which denomination is most aligned with the beliefs of the early church? You want to grab that one?
Yeah. So this is one of those questions that's like, there is some nuance here that you have to get into, because what you have to understand is that, like, it's easy for us in the present day where we stand on the shoulders of giants to try and port things back into a day and age where like certain things just were not systematized. And so in present day, quote unquote, denominationalism, you have a lot of like systematizing of theology that you didn't find there. But I'm obviously going to be biased toward my own. So I'm obviously going to say that the Presbyterians are, because again, even our governance, like you're going to see in the next video, that the early church was Presbyterial in their governance, and the episcopacy grew out of that. But also too, I would even defend our view of real presence, and say that you can find, now I understand that there was some nuance around like language, but we essentially hold to like a like metaphysical realism view, like you see in some of the Eastern fathers like Cyril, and that sort of thing. So anyways, I'm obviously going to be biased toward my own.
Scott Michael, $2. What's the best way to support Canon and Creed?
Subscribe to the channel, tell people about it. That's it right now. Members is going to come, all that stuff's going to come, but like I had a lot of people come over from Answering Adventism and they're like, man, when is there going to be like this and this? And it's like, well, I'm following the same blueprint in generals that I did on Answering Adventism. And I'm not doing live streams, for example, yet, because I'm just not there. I need to put out enough short form content to build up before getting to where people are like, okay, I'll listen to this guy for 2 hours or whatever it may be. So.
Yeah, I'm liking your method so far. You're building up to more and more and more and more. So it's very intentional. You're not just putting out the like slop stuff, or just hitting like this is the news. This is the new thing going out right now.
No. Evergreen content. It'll be relevant 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Awesome. All right. So question: if you hold to apostolic succession, how do you reconcile that with the position that the church is not infallible if you think the church is fallible?
I'm not sure I understand the question, because
the argument have to do with each other.
The argument, and again, I wish I could find, I can't believe I don't remember the exact page. I wish I could read for this guy this quote, because I'm not citing it in this video. The apostolic succession video I'm working on is going to be 2 parts. The first one is focused on history. The second one is going to be focused on the biblical, like exhausting the biblical like the biblical witness. And let's see, it was on oh yeah, there we go. Okay. He says on here, there we go. So this is from, again, Jerome Zonke. He is a Reformed scholastic, but he puts forth essentially our position. And this is just one of the many points that he brings out. But he says, for example, the succession of bishops whereby a specific church can be demonstrated to be apostolic. Thus, we acknowledge that a specific church can be shown to be properly apostolic by a perpetual succession of bishops, but not just any kind of succession. Rather, proper apostolic succession is the kind that is accompanied by a continuation of apostolic doctrine, as was the case for the Roman Church and her bishops once upon a time. So our argument is that you can't just completely denote, because Calvin, for example, argued in the Institutes that both Rome and the East have the laying on of hands back to the apostles, yet they claim each other are heretics, and they've anathematized one another. So what sure evidence do we need that can't be the barometer for doctrinal protection? If you both have hands laid on back to the apostles, yet you've anathematized each other, then clearly the laying on of hands can't be the guarantee for protection and fidelity. But basically, Zonke goes on here, and I think this is relevant to the point there. He goes on to say, basically, like, we're not saying that we don't condemn, he says, the early fathers who added more offices. Like, he cites Jerome, just like I do and others do, and says, we don't condemn them for doing this. It makes sense. There was like a practical thing that they were trying to prevent. They didn't want schisms to happen. And so they, like human beings, tried to do what they best could, etc. But I'm not exactly sure. Like, I think he's saying, like, if you hold the apostolic succession, and I think he's assuming a certain understanding of apostolic succession. And so I think that's kind of the problem, is like, well, by apostolic succession, I'm not meaning the Roman Catholic view, or even like some of the Anglican view or the Orthodox view. But I believe our view is apostolic because it literally goes back to what the apostles practiced, even though we call it presbyterial succession.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good way to answer that. It's not a barometer for infallibility. I don't know how those two things would really even practically tie into each other, because then you would say, well, does that mean the Anglicans are infallible, the Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, the
Yeah, maybe
Roman
he can
Catholics?
re-ask. Well, maybe he can re-ask the question too, and maybe if he words it
Sure.
another way, we'll better understand what he's saying.
Absolutely. Gustavo asked, what is your view on ecumenism and the branches of it? Low ecumenism, middle, and total total ecumenism. I made this up. So, well, thank you
Like,
for elaborating. Yeah. So you can talk about people like Redeem Zoomer, that is a low ecumenism. So I'm assuming I'll define it in this way. There's ecumenism between like Nicene Christianity, right? I think that's
yeah,
perfectly valid. That's licit. Um, Now, I guess it depends on what you're working with the individual on, right? So, I mean, it would be very difficult to do ministry with somebody on maybe the topic of, is Calvinism right or wrong? With
yeah,
an Arminian and a Calvinist, that might not work too well. But that's just more of a practical thing. I have no issue doing streams with anybody that is Nicene Christian. I'm never going to team up with a oneness Pentecostal. I'm never going to team up with any kind of modalist, Seventh-day Adventist.
Mormon.
Yeah, exactly. Mormon, and none of the cults. I'm not going to team up with a Muslim. Or that would be the other part. Radical ecumenism would be
Mm,
teaming up with any of those individuals, atheists, Muslims, agnostics. You can go on and on with the distinctions, but that would be the distinction that I would make. Would be ecumenism between Christians. I don't see too much of an issue. Now I do see it as an issue if you were to be like a one true church, or I could see how that would be like a,
yeah.
in inconsistency in your worldview. But radical ecumenism, never. God specifically forbids it. He forbids radical ecumenism, and he gives you the results of radical ecumenism, which is idolatry. Basically, he gives you over to your lusts. So that's why you see the UMC, United Methodist Church, rainbow flags all over the place, pride shows, etc. I don't have to rehash it all, but you get the point.
Yep. I think it depends too what somebody means by like. Unfortunately, ecumenism has become sort of like, well, in which way are you using this word? I get called an ecumenist all the time because I don't think that, I think Roman Catholics can be Christians and I think
Mm,
Orthodox can be Christians, because I distinguish, like the reformers did, between an
right.
institution and the individual laity. Like you,
Yeah.
you can't just assume something about a person. That's why I'm not a fan really of like, and again, I know this ruffles some people's feathers on my side of the aisle, but it's like, I'm gonna have a video on this eventually. But I'm not really a fan of the like, you have a false gospel, like shouting that at somebody, because
Yeah.
it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Because you got to get deeper with a person and like really get into like, hey, so we both agree that like faith is going to produce obedience and like good works. We don't believe in dead faith, obviously, but like, what do you believe the relationship between your active doing and your peace with God is? That's what I care about, not what association do you have with like a certain group or whatever. And so because I take that approach, I get called an ecumenist all the time. But then at the same time, I get a lot of Adventists that think I claim you have to be Presbyterian to be a Christian. So
Right. Right.
it just depends what a person means. But I take the historic Protestant view that
Mhm.
Nicene, by virtue of a person's baptism, if it's a valid baptism, by virtue of your baptism, that's the equivalent of you being marked as a part of the visible community. And so I
Yeah.
consider validly baptized individuals to be Christians. Now, whether or not they're saved, well, that's God's business. And I'm going to have discussions with them regardless of if they're Protestant or not.
Sure.
But that's where I stand, is like people who have true valid baptisms, even the East. I know like the Essence Energies distinction is considered this like, well, is that a different God, etc. But see, they're not actively warring against Nicene Christianity. They're seeking to uphold what they believe to be Nicene Christianity. I saw a lot of Roman Catholics bringing this up, for example, with the whole Muslims adoring the true God discussion from a few weeks ago, where they were
Sure.
trying to like corner Protestants and be like, well, do the Orthodox have a false God then? Because the Essence Energies distinction? No, dude, because they're actively pursuing Nicene Christianity, not actively rejecting it.
Yeah. And let me just put it this way. One way that I'll flip that around, because they say the same thing about the filioque. I just asked them,
Yeah.
well, would they say the essence energy distinction is their God? Would you say the filioque is your God,
Yeah.
or is that a theological distinction? I would say the Trinity is my God. I'd say Jesus
Yeah.
is my God, right?
Yeah.
It's not a theological distinction. That's who God is. So there's a difference when you're talking about like ontology and maybe a theological distinction. Let me get into this next question. We got quite a few. We're going for about maybe 15 more minutes. Hailstorm, if Christ, he's giving it hypothetical. If Christ died in 1776, the Nicene Creed wouldn't be held until 2067. Shouldn't we consider that the church was completely woke by the time the fathers showed up? Well, fathers doesn't refer to just post Nicaea, right? Fathers, you
Yeah.
could have ante-Nicene
That's the,
fathers.
I was about to say, that's a whole category.
Mhm.
Well, and well, not just that too, but like that's also assumes a lot of things because like the modern era is just very different in terms of the spread of information, the amount of access to information, et cetera. It's just
Sure.
historically like we're in a different context.
Yeah, I mean, I would just ask, what do you think developed? Because we have the writings of everybody that came before that, just about. I mean, the significant individuals. I'm sure there's stuff that's lost, so maybe that's too broad of a statement to make. But we have a lot of the writings from the ante-Nicene fathers. So if you think there's some kind of inconsistency, compare and contrast, and tell me what you think got woke by that time.
Yep.
Um, Gustavo, what doctrine do you hold that other tradition holds, but your church don't?
Like what beliefs do I have that because like the thing is it's like my confessions, the reformed confessions, they're not like exhaustive about every possible thing under the sun. But we were just talking about some of them earlier. My view regarding my view regarding baptism is the minority view within the reform world. Yes, there's a spectrum. Believe it or not, a lot of the early modern reformed Orthodox theologians believed in like a form of baptismal regeneration. My view of Mary is definitely anomalous to Presbyterians. But also too, I'm in the minority on this, but again, I would argue it was at one point a lot of the heavy hitters. I affirm like a hypothetical universalism regarding the atonement. I'm not like a hard limitarian like a lot of people think. I'm not a tulip Calvinist, which is associated with like 20th century new Calvinism, where like they try to boil it down to like the tulip. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that, but I also don't hold to like a hard limitarian view, and I don't think that that's actually necessary. So there's a couple.
Hypothetical universal. What does that? You mean like a
So
hopeful?
no, so HU is within the Reformed world. The Synod of Dort is really like it's one of the parts of the three forms of unity. So it's part of our confessional standards. And what you have at Dort is you have two viewpoints regarding the extent of the atonement. So we're really all talking about the extent of the atonement. And not just Reform people, but all of us. We all limit the atonement in various ways. That's just the reality, unless you're a universalist. If you're a universalist, you literally believe every single person, and some people go so far as to say even the angels and Satan. But outside of the universalists, we all limit the atonement in certain ways. But in the Reformed world, you have really two views. You have the hard limitarian view, what people call limited atonement or definite atonement. Again, that's been basically the understood by like pop culture and the average person out there when they object to Calvinism, they typically are like, oh, but they affirm limited atonement. Well, that's one view where Christ basically died only for the elect. Whereas there's also a view called hypothetical universalism, which was really popularized by a guy named Moses Amarat, what people call Amaraldianism sometimes, but also John Davenant. So he was the English delegate at Dort, and he held to and popularized hypothetical universalism, which is basically just consistent with Peter Lombard's, sufficient for all, but efficacious only for the elect. And it's just in line with that. But I just think it's a far more, I think the arguments actually are after studying, I used to hold to the hard limitarian view, but after studying both of them, I hold to the hypothetical universals. I believe Jesus died for all people, not just the elect in a certain sense. There's a sense in which, because if he didn't, then technically, hypothetically speaking, not all people are savable because a person's only savable if Jesus died for them. And so hypothetically speaking, every human being is savable. and Jesus's blood is enough to save every single human being. But obviously, I'm not a universalist, so I don't believe every person will be saved. But hypothetically speaking, his death made every human being savable because it was for all people.
Sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, because I hear that and I'm like, hopefully universal. That's like where my brain goes.
No, it's universal regarding the extent of the atonement.
Makes sense. All right, Mickey G Tunes. Do you agree when Paul says our lives are not our own but the Lord's? Yeah, of course. In addition, does this give God divine justification to take? Yeah, of course. Yeah. If God wants to kill me, he can kill me.
Yeah, because murder is different than killing.
Mm-hmm.
Murder is the unjustified, unlawful taking of life.
All right, Landon P. Question: can you define the separation of church and state, and would you hold to it? Do you want me to grab this? We might not agree.
I hold to the, well, this is a big thing in the Reformed tradition, actually. I'm not a hard, so I believe that there is a role that the magistrate is to play in the life of mainly defending and protecting the rights of the church, but not to be intermingled in the sense that the church should be the state. That's like the most simple way of putting it without getting into my whole, I've got, we want to talk about this. We talked about Redeem Zoomer. I've got Lex Rex here, Samuel Rutherford, and that's exactly what it is getting into, is that the duty of, according to scripture, there's multiple spheres of sovereignty, that the government is a God-given role, that God has prescribed certain bounds that they're to operate within. And I believe that part of that bounds is to not only uphold justice in the society for the evildoer, to punish the evildoer, and uphold what is righteous, and God's standard is the standard of righteousness, the only objective standard. But their duty is also to protect the church, and to protect the religious liberty of the church in conducting word and sacrament ministry. Now, I know that this is going to ruffle a lot of people's feathers, but it is what it is. I don't think that is necessarily or should necessarily be extended to pagan religions. That I don't think the duty of the state is to protect pagan religions, because again, I'm operating from a Christian framework where I am operating from the foundation of the true God. And the true God has said that the state is to protect true worship, not pagan, idolatrous worship.
Right. My thing on the separation of church and state, this is more like an American type innovation. Yeah. You do see this elsewhere, the seeds of it, but this really all stems from the Enlightenment. If you were to read, how am I going to say this without sounding offensive? I don't know if I really want to dive into it that deep. Read the Alta Vendita, see what they say about the separation of church and state. That's the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, which is a Freemasonic text. That's what I'll say. I'll give you a somewhere to fish, so I don't make the entire chat angry. Let's see. What is your view on the Israel of the Bible and modern day Israel?
The church is Israel.
Yep. Easy enough.
I'm not a dispensationalist. Yep, and people call that quote unquote replacement theology, these sort of like backhanded comments. And it's like, no, dude, it's fulfillment theology. The promises to Israel are to the whole seed. And if we're in Christ, we're all Abraham's seed. So I'm not a dispensationalist. So
Micah, question: what about the Catholic charismatic renewal, which is in full communion with Rome and picked up speaking in tongues from a Protestant church in the 60s, which Pope John Paul II affirmed? Yeah, I think that's a big issue for Roman Catholics to affirm this as an actual outpouring of the gifts, because if you were to look at what the early church taught on speaking in tongues, it looks nothing like the Azusa Street revival. It looks nothing like any of that stuff. So I don't know. That strikes me as a big issue within their system. What do you think?
Yeah, this is one of those areas where and I have a video coming out on this as well. I don't want to spill all the beans, but I'm going to be talking about this, we have unity and look how confused all the Protestants are. And it's like, well, really, no, we can flip that script around. We have diversity because we admit ours. You guys don't, because you don't admit yours. And it's very easy to hide all of that under the guise of, but we're all part of one institution. And see, you guys aren't part of one institution, so therefore you're all divided. Yet when you pop the hood on internally the institution, you see all sorts of stuff like this. I mean, they're not the only ones. You know, you've got like Pachamama and like you've got all sorts of stuff that it's like, man, if you've only ever seen this in America, you're going to be shocked to go to like Brazil and these other, you know, Latin American countries where there's all sorts of stuff like this going on. I mean, I don't know about this specific group, this charismatic renewal, but man, I know about some of the other ones. Again, I'm not going to spill the beans now, but yeah, there's some that are they're like mixing like witchcraft basically with like, it's like a version of like witchcraft. It's like syncretism basically with like witchcraft.
John, I don't know what number that is or what currency that is, but thank you for the super chat. Can you reject Calvinism and still go to Presbyterian church, or will you be anathematized like RCC or EO if you disagree with their church doctrines?
Yeah, no, because here's the thing. We don't, what we understand to be dogma is the necessary heads of religion. Calvinism is a systematic theology. So no, we don't dogmatize like you have to affirm our systematic theology or you're lost. So no, there's lots of people at my church that you could probably start talking to. They just love the Lord. They come to receive him in word and sacrament every week. You could get into all these specifics with them and they'd be like, huh, I don't know. I just love Jesus, you know? So no, you 100% you could be there. Now, if you wanted to be a member, you would have to obviously like agree to submit to the standards, obviously like you would at any other church, but you're not like, it's never been the reformed position that if you're not reformed, you're not a Christian. You don't need to be reformed to be a Christian. You need to be in union with Christ.
Good answer. All right. Dawn Patrol question. How can I answer when Roman Catholics or Eastern Orthodox claim that Protestantism is the cause of relativism? I mean, I would just answer, I would ask them if they understand what the Enlightenment was. Ask them if they understand philosophy. If Protestantism is the cause of relativism, these are two, it's like a category error. That would be like me saying, Roman Catholicism is the cause of Pride Mass. I don't know. Like, what would be a comparable comparison? You might be able to come up with a better one.
Yeah, well, there's a number of things that come to my mind here. Again, okay, what do you mean by Protestantism? Because again, here we are, you're using this weaponized word that it just means any group that we want to label that's not Roman Catholic and Orthodox, so that way we can make it look as horrible as possible. And so this all goes back to the it rained on my birthday because of Luther type thinking. Like everything's Luther's fault. Oh yeah, it's all Luther's fault. And so I just there's a lot that I could say here, because I would ask probing questions to try and pick apart, showing why this is just like a nonsensical question, because also too, history is not that linear.
Right. Julio JD question: thoughts on essence energy distinction? Are there Protestant groups who teach this? Not that I'm aware of.
because Protestantism as a quote unquote movement is a Western movement. I mean, it happened. Right. The Reformation happened. It tried to spread east with like Cyril Lucarius and like these types of people, but and that's obviously the goal, because again, the goal should be for unification. We should be praying for unity, of course, but yeah, it is a Western move. So no, we affirm what the Western understanding.
If you want to research into essence energy distinction, this is the book to get. Gregory Palamas, The Triads. This is his first writing on essence energy distinction. He clarifies in a second book called Dialogue with an Orthodox and a Barlamite. So this is way cheaper though. So start with this. This is like $20. The other book is like $60. The Classics of Western Spirituality, which is a
so it's not like one of those cheap like Amazon binds or whatever.
No, this is
it like typeset nicely?
Paulist Press.
Okay. So
yeah, this is a good. It's nice.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, I need to get a copy of that.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap. It's like $20. The other book is like $50 or $60. But anyway, so we're coming to the end of it. I figure we'll grab one more question, unless anybody wants to send in a last minute super chat, but we'll wrap up after the next question I grab. Okay. Let's see. Let me find a good one for the last one. Some of these are just repeats of the previous ones. Would you? Okay, this is a good question. Neville, question. I came in late. Are Adventists part of the body of Christ?
Here is the nuanced, charitable answer. There are individual Adventists who are born again people who are in union with Christ. They don't know any better. There's a huge spectrum there. You've got, contrary to their narrative, that they're this united monolith and everyone else is this divided, confused mess. No, Adventism is one of the most doctrinally confused and divided groups out there. You have evangelical Adventists. I have a friend, for example. He started going to an Adventist church, and when him and I got to talking eventually about how he even ended up there, he said, "Oh, I saw the sign and I looked up the word Adventist and it said that it has to do with the return of Jesus, and I believe that. So I started going there." I mean, you're going to get people all across the spectrum. So on an individual basis, I'm very consistent with this. On an individual basis, yes, if you understand the body of Christ to be Christ as the head and those in union with him, yes, there are Seventh-day Adventists. Organizationally speaking, absolutely not. Avoid. Go to answeringadventism.com, go to the YouTube channel. I've exhausted it there. If that's not enough proof, man, I mean, I don't know what will be. So,
right. Yeah, my concern with this is, I mean, they're basically guilty of the Judaizer heresy.
when they have
If
a
you were
false
to look
God. That's the thing. People don't
Right.
understand. They have a false God. They claim to believe in the Trinity, and it's not the Trinity. I've done
Right.
hours and hours and hours on this, which is why their baptism is not valid. They may use the right words, the words of, being baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and the Spirit, but it's not the same God. It'd be the equivalent of a Mormon baptism. They say the same thing. But do we believe that that's a valid baptism just because they use the right words
Right.
and formula? Well, no, of course not. So it's a false church with a false gospel and a false God headed up by a false prophet. You need to avoid it like the plague.
Correct. Yep. I'm actually going to grab this last one here because I do want to
Okay.
correct a statement I said. Blaine Tulsi says, question, does this include what David Wood and AP were doing against Islam when AP was still an atheist? So I'll go back. I will update my previous statement. I don't necessarily see that as an issue because they're dunking on Islam and he's an ex-Muslim. So there's merit in bringing somebody with an ex-Muslim perspective to show how deficient Islam is. But would I defend Christianity with an atheist? That's a different story for me. What do you think?
Trent Doherty did.
Yeah. That's a different story for me. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
When it comes to defending your own doctrines, like he's defending Vatican II, he's defending the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church with an atheist who his entire platform, I don't know if you know this about Danny. I've debated him in the past on TikTok when I was there for 1 month, and then I got sick of the app and I deleted it. But his whole thing is debating the Trinity and mocking people for believing in the Trinity. So you're teaming up with a bisexual blasphemer who is an atheist, not talking about AP, talking about Danny, to defend Vatican II. He literally named his name bisexual atheist there. I mean, I find a big issue with that. So are you able to find individuals who are good faith, maybe have a perspective on a particular religion that they had left, like say AP, I think is very unique in how he approached that. And then he also became a Christian as well. But that's honestly been kind of David Wood's thing for a while because that's how he converted Nabil Qureshi as well, being very friendly with individuals like that. So I think it has its place, especially if that is the intent. That was not the intent with the Trent Doherty debate. The intent with the Trent Doherty debate was grab this guy because he's good at philosophy. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if he's a blasphemer who hates Christians and says the Trinity is fake pagan philosophy nonsense.
Yeah.
So
I don't have a comment on this because I don't know enough about David Wood. I mean, I know who David Wood is, but I just have not consumed enough of his stuff. I do know that he's, but I literally cannot even meaningfully comment on that in a way.
So I'll correct my statement. I don't have an issue with somebody teaming up with an atheist to dunk on Islam if it's like an ex-Muslim or something. I'm more talking about defending Christianity itself. Like Like if you're going to do ministry with an atheist defending your own belief in Christianity, that seems to blur some lines there. But teaming up with him for his perspective on Islam, which is a religion he left, I don't see too much of an issue.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a nuanced question, good question, which is why I wanted to make sure I got to it. Plus, I respect Apostate Prophet very much. Me when he came to Christ, me and my wife were literally celebrating in our house. We were like,
Yeah.
yes, because I always watch David Wood's videos, I watch AP's videos a lot. And I'll sit there and I'll play them. I'm like chilling in the bedroom, and you'll hear David Wood's like impressions or something, and I'll hear my wife laugh from the living room, like listening to it. So anyway,
I know that was exciting, and then it was like having to put a sock in the people who were like, oh, he didn't join the right group, he didn't join my tribe. Like, dude, would you stop? Can we ever just like celebrate that Christ is like saving people?
Yeah, I missed a super chat. Templar, $2. This has been a great stream. Cheers. Thank you so much. God bless you. All right, well, that's pretty much all we have. Anything you want to plug before we wrap up here?
Yeah, search Canon and Creed on YouTube. The channel will pop up. Come check it out. Like I said, Answering Adventism is for the most part on YouTube pretty well slowed down, but there is still some stuff taking place there. It's just not super frequent. But over on Canon and Creed, new videos every week, Mondays and Wednesdays. Come check it out, especially if you're a Protestant or an evangelical.
All right, you should drop your tagline that you do on your videos.
Yeah, I just well, it depends which one you're saying. At the end I have one, but then also too I have one at the beginning where I always tell people, but before we get into it, welcome to Canon and Creed. My name is Miles. If you like what we're doing here, hit subscribe, ring the notification bell, and let me know in the comments which Christian tradition you are listening from. But then there's also at the end, it's basically that, and if you're a Protestant, you don't need to convert, you just need to remember. Because that's really the big thing, is like bringing up that all this stuff is like, folks, it's there. You just need to remember all these arguments. This stuff has been dealt with. This stuff's not new. There's just a lot of people today have forgotten or just never heard these things. So I'm trying to bring that stuff back to you so that you can remember when you hear these arguments. You don't have apostolic succession. Martin Luther removed books from the Bible. Sola Fide is novel to Luther. All this stuff you can remember. Okay, I remember. No, that's not true. So.
All right, let's do this. Say it one time, very serious, and then I'm going to end the stream.
Okay. Well, now that you hold on. Now that you put me on the spot, if you're a Protestant, you don't need to convert. You just need to remember.